A very good evening to each and every one of you here. It's indeed a proud occasion, a memorable moment, a unique opportunity to hold high the values, the ethos, the culture, the dreams and vision of a man who came thousands and thousands of miles away from his homeland and made this land, India, his home, and made India's children his own children. He adopted them wholeheartedly, nurtured them emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Today, my dear friends, we confront crisis on every front. Whether it's a political crisis that's engulfing us, the debt crisis in certain parts of the world, demographic crisis, and finally, the environmental crisis, the collapse of the biodiversity that has been sustaining us for millennia. Eventually, we can boil it down to a social and relational crisis. In other words, we as humanity have forgotten to connect with one another. We have lost the art of relating to one another. We have lost sight of a sense of community. So, we have become so disconnected, isolated from one another, that we have cut off the very umbilical cord that unites us with one another and the nature around us. It is at this juncture, in this moment of crisis, Father McGrath shows us the way. From the deep conversation that I had with the alumni who have been touched, influenced, molded, and guided by Father McGrath, I sensed that he was an illuminator. An illuminator. Who is an illuminator? An illuminator is a blessing to those who are with him. He is a boon to the community around him. He bestows wisdom on the world. Now, a wise person is not a lofty sage who doles out life-altering advice to others. A person of wisdom is one who comes down and lives with us. He sees us deeply and allows us to see him deeply. He helps us to connect with ourselves and connect with one another. He helps us see our own gifts and potential, even those ones that we do not really see. Eventually, he creates a community of truth. A community of truth is created when people are genuinely interested in seeing and exploring together without manipulating one another. We live in a post-truth world where truth no longer matters. Values are given the go-by. Ethics and morals no longer have the primacy. It is in this moment you are a sign of hope. The gathering here, the venture that alumni have come together and launched and have sustained for the last 5 years is a beacon of hope. Every revolution brings with one man's dream, one man's vision. And this group here, however small it might be, can unleash a revolution. The sun illuminates the world outside us, but values, recognition, respect, and sense of dignity for one another illuminates the world within. And that's what Father McGrath stands for. He illuminates our hearts and minds so that we can find our own truth and walk in that truth. Ultimately, humanity can flourish, thrive. We can create a peaceful and prosperous world, a world where everybody has their place. Everybody has their respect and dignity if you are able to discover this truth and walk in the light of truth. So on this occasion, my warmest congratulations to each and every one of you and the teams which are going to engage in the final rounds of debate. Let's carry this flame of hope so that the future will be illuminated. The topic that you have chosen for today, corporations and environmental stewardship, is so deeply appropriate for this occasion. It reminds us that we are all part of the complex web of life, that each one of us is a delicate strand in this web of life. And unless we together, as a community, safeguard this, we can unravel this web of life. That is the existential crisis that is staring us in the face. May this debate and the conversation that will go on henceforward may help us understand, to develop a sense of community, which Father McGrath strove for, that this world becomes truly a commons. Thank you. God bless each and every one of you, your family. May we all together celebrate the memory, the dream, and vision of this Father McGrath so that we are able to actualize his dream, live out his values in the details of our everyday life. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Father. So now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time that we start with the debate. It's been a fierce journey to get here. This year, we saw participation from over 65 B schools across the country, with 500 plus teams and 1,000 plus students competing. And after a rigorous process, we now have our top 4 finalists present with us here. To guide us through the debate, we have our dynamic chairperson, Mr. Sarit Nair. A little about Mr. Nair. He's the head of corporate relations at XLRI and a seasoned leader with over 2 decades of experience across NBFCs, EdTech, real estate, and FMCG sectors. You may remember his engaging style as a chairperson if you were with us last year, and we are delighted to have him back for the 5th edition. Mr. Nair, stage is all yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The second time I am being here in the same auditorium. Last year also I was here. So very glad to be part of this initiative by the XLRI alumni. So this is the 5th edition, as already been told. And this year we had over 1,000 teams registering. and more than 100 odd teams who participated in the initial elimination round. And today we have the final 4 who are there. So the teams are Bell Curve from XLRI Jamshedpur, Gregarious SG from IIM Lucknow, Maverick and Riceman from SPJ in Mumbai, and Optimus from XLRI Jamshedpur. So these are the final 4. So before we start the formal debate, I would just take some time to let you know the rules of the game, how it is. Therefore, everybody is on the same page. And there are 2 rounds in the pre-final stage. So 2 teams come in. One would represent the government and the other would represent the opposition. This is similar to the British Parliament debate competition. So we have a Prime Minister and a Deputy Prime Minister from the government side, and we have a Leader of Opposition and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition from the opposition side. So the government would actually talk for the motion, and the opposition would be against, right? So each team member would be given 4 minutes to speak. There would be a bell after 3 minutes, and then the final bell after 1. Abhishek, the timer is out there, so he will guide me actually in terms of the time. So once the 4 members speak, then we have an opportunity for the closing remarks by the Prime Minister for 4 minutes, and then again a counter by the Leader of the Opposition for another 4 minutes. So one round would be approximately 24 minutes, and I expect a very intense debate, just like last year, to happen this time also. Because this year it's more concerned about climate change, environment, and what are the roles of the government and the business establishments to make sure that the climate change doesn't affect us much. It's already there. Initially we will say that climate change is coming, but now it is already there. So what are the young minds going to tell us in terms of how to counter these challenges? What is the government's role? What is the corporation's role in that? Is something which we will find out when they debate on that. So let me now introduce you to the August jury for this evening. And while I call upon the name of the jury members, I would request them to just be on the stage. The left side is reserved for you. You can take down the seat. And I request all of you to give them a warm welcome to the stage. So first, let me welcome Anu Lal, founder of Yoga Smith and author. Give her a big hand. Let me now call upon Vinay Nair, General Manager, Costa Emerging International. Dr. Akshay Sani, the Managing Director of Chevron. Mr. Ashok Ramachandran, Director of HR Aditya Birla Group. Ranjit Gupta, Managing Director, Wholesale Banking Operations, Wells Fargo. Last but not the least, we have Rajesh Lakhanpal, Managing Director of Courts India. May I request all of you to take the seat, please. You have the guidelines which is kept there, and the scoring sheet also is ready for you. So as when the debate starts. Right, so they have settled down. Now it's the real start of the game, right? So we need to call in the teams for the first round. They know the topic, they know who they're talking for and who they're talking against. Right, so the first 2 teams, the first team is Gregarious SG from IIM Lucknow, represented by Ganatavya and Sonali Bora. They would be speaking for the motion. That means they represent the government, right? So they'll come with the government's viewpoint on what they should do. Take your seat. The second team for the first round today is Maverick and Iceman from SPJ in Mumbai, represented by Saurav Nanda and Mihir Joshi. Now here comes the Leader of the Opposition and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, who's going to talk against the motion. All set?
Set.
We'll start. You know the rules of the game. 4 minutes for each. You have a bell after 3 minutes, and then a final bell after the 4th minute, right? So the Prime Minister would start, and then it goes to the Leader of Opposition, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. After that, you have one more chance for the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition to counter, right? That's again for 4 minutes, right? Just clarifying it once again. Right. So with all your blessings, let's start the first round of debate this time. So for the 5th Father McGrath Memorial, the topic is that the government would move in the House. They believe that the environmental stewardship is best achieved through government regulation and not by private sector innovation and corporate responsibility. That's what the topic for the first one is. So we'll all be ready for the heated debate now. So let me now call on the Prime Minister to introduce the motion.
Let me know when second start. Let me know when second start.
Yeah, you can. Right now you can start.
Good evening, everyone. Today, I present myself in front of all of you to stand for the motion that government regulations and not private innovation and corporate responsibility works in the favor of environmental stewardship. Now, before we get into our argument, let's first understand what exactly is environmental stewardship. As per the United Nations Global Compact, environmental stewardship is the understanding and effective management of critical environmental risks such as carbon emissions, waste management, resource consumption, biodiversity consumption, and many more. Now, while climate action is a global priority, it gets shrouded in complex and convoluted discussions that deviate us from actual action points. I'm going to cut through all of that and present 3 clear, concise, strong points as to why government regulations can make that difference. The first is that the inherent purpose of private entities is not environmental stewardship. It is making profits. It's not altruism. It's not corporate responsibility. It's not charity. They're here to make profits. And because of that, that restricts them in the regions that they operate, that restricts them in the opportunities that they operate. Let's take the example of India. Over the last couple of years, a lot of climate startups have bloomed. Today, India has more than 3,000 startups addressing climate and sustainability issues. Do you know out of that how many are in urban cities? 85%. That is a clear indicator that companies are clouded where there are opportunities for them to make profits. Whereas government, on the other hand, is present everywhere. And environmental challenges are not just restricted to cities and urban towns, but even in Tier 2, Tier 3 and rural regions. As per a recent IRENA report, the International Renewable Energy Agency, it was government subsidies and regulations that increased the adoption of renewable energy in rural as well as Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities by 90% from 2010 to 2022. Our second point is that environmental challenges are extremely complex. Like respected father mentioned, that these are deeply layered and these are not something that's very surface. And private entities don't see the complete picture. Let's take the example of what's happening in Delhi right now. Everyone knows that our air quality index is in a really bad position. And everyone also thinks that solving the problem of stubble burning, replacing slash and burn agriculture by some new age technology will solve the problem. But that's not happening. The issue has many layers. It's decades of community issue. There are livelihood issues. There are income issues. There are so many stakeholders involved, which the private entities are not able to touch and completely comprehend because they are unavailable at grassroots levels. And government is available at grassroots level. They understand these complex challenges and they have a long-term picture in mind, which is something that a lot of private entities lack. My last point is that the government has the power to actually make a difference. They have financial resources. They have the ability to mobilize people. They have regulatory influence, something that private entities lack. And in fact, most of the things that private entities do are an afterthought of government regulations and programs. We have seen companies capitalize on regulations, companies capitalize on incentives and schemes, and not be the front runners of it. To summarize, private investments and corporate entities lack the people-first initiative. They lack the complete picture. They lack the power that government regulations and government authorities have. And therefore, I feel government entities and government regulations are the frontiers and should be the leaders in environmental change. Thank you.
Great. So the government has very clearly mentioned that corporates are not here for altruism, but for profits. So let's hear what the leader of the opposition, he was taking down notes. Let's hear what his counter is. Your time now.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for presenting his views. So before starting, I would like to say that every day when we wake up, we make a choice about what kind of a leader we want to be. And that choice lies upon us. Sitting in a room filled with the most ignited minds of this country, I would say, who are going to be the torch bearers and go into corporate world tomorrow. I would like to say and believe that environmental stewardship is not just going to be in the hands of the government, but is actively going to be a part of the private sector as well. Coming on to the point raised by the Honorable Prime Minister here.
Carry on.
Yeah, sorry. Coming on to the points raised by the Honorable Prime Minister here, his first point was that the inherent purpose of driving positive change is not altruism, but is profits as it comes to the private sector, right? I'd like to draw your attention onto the fact, talk about Carnegie in 1892. When they set up a steel plant back then, they accounted for almost 2 deaths per day. Fast forward to today and talk about Tesla driving positive change. Talk about the likes of Tatas and Mahindras into the EV workspace. And they're driving positive change not just because they want to meet some government regulation, but they want to be ahead of the curve and they want to give the product to the customer that is valuable and is actually needed. The second was the complex problems that are associated and cannot be handled by the private sector. So you brought up a point about the deteriorating AQI in Delhi, and that is much to do with the stubble burning. And there are deep-rooted problems like income issues. I would like to say, let's talk about Swaraj in partnership with Mahindra, what they are doing. If you know, they are actually giving harvesters at a very subsidized cost. And that is what, not because of the government action, but they actually want to drive change there, and they want to actually be a positive change. I would like to say that private sector, if they want, have the power to drive positive change. I have a few examples with me. Let's talk about the ITC's water stewardship program. Or be it Tata Power, where they're actually going for mangrove forestation. Or let's talk about Mahindra's Haryali project. If we have to just talk about the definition of what environmental stewardship is, the most important part is conservation. And a lot of companies are going there suo moto. Let's talk about Patagonia's sustainable environmental changes. They have gone into sustainable clothing, and they just don't want to meet the regulations when it comes to the criteria of CSR, but they actually want to go a step forward where they want to bring the positive change in the life of every consumer that they are going to touch. On top of that, because of the suo moto action, companies are not just looking to meet the regulations, but talk about being an active participants in government forums like discussing with the likes of ARAI, where they're actually giving innovative ideas on how the future should look like. And that is a testimony of the companies not just driven by profit standards, but trying to make real changes in life. Thank you.
Thank you. While the debate is getting heated up, I would request all of you to keep, understanding who the best speaker is, right? Because we will have an audience speaker contest also at later who the best speaker was. Right, so now to cement the government's argument, saying that it's more of a government function, I'd call on the Deputy Prime Minister to lay her views.
Thank you. Some very thought-provoking points put forward by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Having said that, I would like to talk about that the motion is not who environmental stewardship is in the hands of. The point that we are making is that the government is best suited to carry forward environmental stewardship. There is an inherent policy in what the opposition says, illustrated by the metaphor of the fox being expected to guard the hen house, implying that the private sector, with its brazen pursuit of the bottom line and unfortunate disregard for planet first is entrusted with the existential responsibility of environmental stewardship. The honorable opposition member also mentioned conservation. Let me take an India-centric approach here. Our scriptures dating back to the Indus Valley civilization teach us that it is everybody's dharma to protect the environment. Mata Bhumi Putroham Prithviya. The earth is my mother and I am her son or daughter in this case. This shloka from the Atharva Ved indicates the relation of humans with the environment, akin to that of a mother with her child, implying that one should not harm either the environment or the flora and fauna. In contemporary India, let us take an India-centric approach and talk about what the Niti Aayog has done. They have formulated very stringent policies for wetland management, mitigation of climate change, habitat protection, and protection of forests. Motivated by these interpretations, we propose a conceptualization of environmental stewardship that is integrative and not in silos, meaning that all the stakeholder actions have to align towards a common goal and a shared purpose. For this, we take an inquiry-based positivist approach and will prove that the notion that environmental stewardship can be led by the private sector is normatively flawed, empirically unsubstantiated, and practically infeasible. The first, that this is normatively flawed, is reflected by the fact that the private sector is incapable of conducting environmental stewardship. Let me give you just 3 examples of the worst global environmental disasters. The first, the Bhopal gas tragedy, of which I am a personal witness. The second, the large-scale dumping of hexavalent chromium by Pacific Oil and Gas, Exxon Valdez, and the Deepwater Horizon. Do I need to go further? Who is going to take this charge of forming an integrative role? The second, that the private sector is going to do this, is practically infeasible because it involves a conflict of interest. Environmental stewardship requires competing stakeholder interests and an integrative approach. Only the government has the power to bring together diverse stakeholders and competing interests. And the third and final argument, that it is empirically unsubstantiated. Let me just take a quick example. In India, before SEBI introduced the business sustainability reporting mandate, less than 10% of publicly listed companies had the smallest modicum of sustainability reporting. Isn't this a glaring fact that mirrors that absence of reporting means an absence of initiatives? In conclusion, I would just like to say that it is a utopian expectation that the private sector can guard the hen house when their self-serving interests and profit-seeking motives are bound to take precedence over environmental stewardship. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an amazing statement. The fox guarding the hen house, right? And she mentioned it again once more, that are you the real fox? You are supporting the real foxes there. So to counter that, I would like the Deputy Leader of Opposition to counter that.
Sure. So can I begin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to highlight the 3 points which were made by the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, which were the inherent purpose, that is profit-driven. Second is environmental complexity and the laws. And third is financial resources. Every single thing has a very good point which are ignorantly missing out on. First, the inherent purpose of profit. As per Companies Act 2013, there is a CSR policy which a company has to give 2% of its profit towards societal needs. Now TCS and Infosys have went beyond that 2% limit because they care about the society, they care about the employees, they care about the society altogether. First. And second is environmental complexity. Now let me give you an example of Tesla. The EPA, which is Energy Policy Act of 2005, which came in 2005. But Tesla, which is an electric vehicle manufacturing company, came in 2001. So basically they are ahead of the curve. They're not anticipating regulations, but they're doing it on a dynamic basis before even government can think about it. Let's talk about SpaceX. SpaceX right now is in space exploration where currently there are no laws. It's very unregulated industry, but they have systematic decommissioning process and projects that will actually decommission the satellite the moment the tenure is over. So it takes proactive approach and not reactive approach. This is what I like to highlight about. And the financial resources which they talked about. Government recently issued $21 billion of tranche in green bonds, out of which 84% was subscribed by the private players. Now, if their theory is right, that government has money, why only 16%? Why are private players more involved in going green rather than the government? Because going green actually has corporate image. It is good for the company. Apart from that, the company image is just one aspect to it, but they want to go beyond because there is ESG framework which is good for their companies and employees altogether. So every single thing come together believes that a company can do good, not just for profit, and also financial resources are not less with private companies, they are actually more, because there are many laws that government has to follow, because of which they cannot come up with good investments. Then I would like to point out attention to the Hindustan Unilever case. In 2009, their chairman, Paul Polman, was appointed, and he was the first person to say that don't judge me on my financial performance, but judge me on my sustainability and other impacts which I have on the society. So what had happened was the share price plummeted. It plummeted by 8% in a single day. But what did it do? It had a cascading effect. Now every single company that is coming, which is a big company, they have sustainability practices. He is on record saying that 5% of the global FMCG footprint is done because of the Unilever. But in essence, 70% of the consumer footprint is done because of using the Unilever products. So in value chain, customers were never part of the value chain, but they included consumers as well. So 70% which they are polluting is now Unilever's prerogative. That's why all the products that Unilever comes with, they are net zero, which means that even after utilizing by the consumer, they are net zero. So if I wanted to say, I would put it in this way, that Elon Musk said that some endeavors which has to be done, even if the probable outcome is a failure, still you have to do because it's important for the society. I would like to end on it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the deputy leader of the opposition is saying that corporates are ahead of the curve. They are also accountable to their actions, right? So to counter that, I saw smiles on the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, when they were speaking, they were taking down notes. So your counter, Mr. Prime Minister, for what they have. You have 4 minutes left for you. You can start now.
Thank you for that. I would like to thank the opposition for actually speaking on our behalf by sharing some points which worked in our favor. By starting off your opposition by stating that the Companies Act, which pushes companies to put 2% into social activities and corporate responsibility. That, my friend, is a government regulation. The second thing you said that companies are here not for profits, for altruism, and then you said, the first thing you said was corporate image. That's exactly what they're there for. It's a term there called greenwashing, which a lot of companies are doing. You also mentioned 3 horrible examples. One, you mentioned Unilever, you mentioned ITC and Tesla, which I'll come to a little further. I'd like to use a story to further push my argument and also diminish some points that they've said. Do you know who this year's winner of the most prestigious environmental award, the Green Nobel Award, was? It goes to the stakeholders involved in the story of the Hasdeo Aranya forest. It's a forest in Chhattisgarh. This is a forest that is 1.7 lakh hectares. It houses massive amount of biodiversity, massive resources and natural resources for local communities. And if there is any forest in India that should not be deforested, this is the one. And this forest was also being encroached by a lot of miners and private entities because it has a lot of coal bed near it. Mr. Alok Shukla, who was the winner of the Green Nobel Prize for 2024, was an activist who noticed that there is deforestation happening, there's destruction happening, and went to the Gram Sabha. The Gram Sabha took on this case, fought this case, went to the state government, made an entire petition, which was passed later by the High Court and the Supreme Court, and this now comes under the Forest Protection Act of India since 2022. And that forest since then has been absolutely untouched because rangers have been put in place to ensure that nobody from outside comes in. This is a story of what a single entity from the government, even if it's as small as a Gram Panchayat, can do when it comes to protecting the environment. You also mentioned some examples, right? And let's face an uncomfortable truth here. right? A lot of damage that's being done to the environment is being done by private organizations. 10% of all waste in landfill is fast fashion waste, which comes from entities like H&M. And you know who the second largest contributor to the fast fashion waste and ocean plastic waste is? HUL, right? So the examples that you mentioned, yes, they are taking initiatives and yes, they're good, but there's also a bit of guilt that they want to cover up. Tesla ranks lower than Shell when it comes to their ESG rating, right? So I would recommend that you read up a bit about what more they do when it comes to their production. And you also mentioned ITC. It has tobacco right in it. In fact, in one of their initiatives, they mentioned that they are more sustainable because they are better than BDs, right? And I don't think that's a great benchmark for companies to follow. I would just like to end and close that the transformative action needed for true environmental stewardship is not just the government's duty. It is everyone's duty. Even private entities need to be involved. Activists need to be involved. All of us need to be involved. It's not an issue just for us. It's not an issue just for our children. It's for future generations, right? And in order for that to happen, we all have to come together, and government has to be the frontier because they have the power, they have the purpose, they have the drive, they have the insight, and they have the resources to do it. Thank you.
Great. So the Prime Minister was better in his counter, saying that it is the corporates who are actually, polluting the environment, and how even the Gram Panchayat is able to protect the environment, right? So now it's your turn to defend whether it's the corporates who are polluting it and whether the corporates can do a much better job than the government. Your final 4 minutes.
Yeah. So some compelling arguments were made by the Honorable Prime Minister here, but I would like to thank him for giving me hooks to every point that he actually mentioned. So I believe that impact creation is not just dependent on resources, but on the intent and approach of the person having them. So I would like you to focus on 2 words here. The first being the intent and the second being the approach. There is a very flawed misconception that the intent of the private sector is only to create profits, but I would like to counter that with a few examples that I'm going to give. Second of all, we talked about a country like India. So let's just stick to it. I come from a country where only 3% of the population is actually paying taxes, and that accounts for a lot of the government budget that goes around. We need a lot more than what the government currently has to actually drive environmental stewardship. And thank you for bringing in the topic of Niti Aayog. I would like to say that the chairman of Niti Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant, himself mentioned that the private sector have to be the drivers of change and have to be the pillars that take the future forward. Let's talk about the government's initiative where they actually want to go to carbon neutral by 2030. Everybody was thinking that it is going to be an impossible task. But let's look at what the private sector did in that. Something that was looking impossible to do even by 2030 is now a reality that we are living in. 2024, and Tata has already reached break-even with respect to its EV sector. Mahindra has invested 17,500 crores into its EV workspace. We talked about the model of Chhattisgarh and how the environmental protection happened there. I would like to counter that, talking about the role of the private sector, that actually they made the new Raipur as the epitome of one of the best cities and keeping in sync the environment at bay. On top of that, we talk about that it is only through a profit-driven purpose. But the society is changing. We are socially conscious citizens, and we talk about triple bottom line, the 3 Ps of the environmental change: the profit, the planet, and the purpose. We keep all 3 together and we go forward with it. I would like to give the example of Tesla and the SpaceX model. Nobody is talking about going into space or going into Mars. Space exploration is a far-fetched thought as on date. But even when SpaceX is launching satellites, and we might argue that there is space debris, they have already started working on their Starlink program, and they are working on how to reduce the problem of space debris, something that's going to come up 10 years down the line. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on anything around you. And that is what Jane Goodwill said. And I would I can't agree more to that. You are going to touch everything around you. It's just that what kind of an impact you are going to create. So as socially conscious individuals, we have to be the drivers of change. Take the example of Suzlon Energy, who have actually invested heavily into the act of carbon sequestration. Let's talk about the Kuznets curve, which is like as we go forward, there is going to be an environmental degradation. But I want to say that the private players are very well aware where the point of no return is. And they are actively working to make the world a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's where we end the first round. So the audience, you have to decide now whether it's the government's role or the private's role in protecting the environment. Thank you, teams. You did a wonderful job. Thank you, teams Gregarious SG and Maverick and Reisman. You can take down your seat. We'll just get back and see who did the best job. Right? Thank you. Over to you.
So while the jury deliberates, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. The gold sponsor for today's event is IDFC First Bank, a brand synonymous with innovation and inclusion. A big shout out also goes to our co-sponsors, BPCL, ONGC, JK Enterprises, JK Tech, Lupin Laboratories, and HPCL. Without their support, without IDFC's support, today's event won't be the powerhouse that this is. And before we proceed further, let us have a look at a small film that IDFC has got for us.
Food on the conveyor belt. Try this.
I have to leave. बैंक में छोटा सा काम है.
अरे भाई साहब आजकल छोटे छोटे काम के लिए बैंक कौन जाता है? अच्छा आप हैं.
मैं जाता हूँ. Why? You have any problem?
भाई एक प्रॉब्लम तो है. मुझे नहीं आपको. आपको बार बार बैंक जाना पड़ता है ना?
अगर मैं बार बार बैंक नहीं गया तो ऐसे ही बैंक हमारे पास थोड़ी ना आने वाला है.
नहीं आता था आपके उन दिनों पहले जमाने में. अब हम जहाँ बैंक वहाँ. बैंक का सारा काम जो है एक उंगली का खेल है.
मैं तो आज भी लाइन में खड़ा रहता हूँ.
आप गलत लाइन में खड़े रहते भाई साहब. IDFC फर्स्ट बैंक होगा
तो मोर मिलेगा.
पीछे कहाँ जा रहा है?
नहीं, मुझे बोला गया था कि आप जहाँ खड़े होते लाइन वहीं से शुरू होती है.
We live in an era which is fast-paced and where there's a lot of competition. And because a little competition doesn't hurt anyone, let's dive into a quiz designed to keep your brains buzzing. The quiz is open to all the audience, and I hope the volunteers are ready. I would dive straight into the first question. So I would ask everyone to listen attentively. I do have some hints lined up, so in case you need a hint, the first person to raise the hand gets the hint. At the same time, if you don't answer, you lose the chance to answer any of the questions coming ahead. Is that clear? Yeah. And we do have goodies for the people who answer the correct. So this city in Europe is known as the cycling capital of the world, with bikes significantly outnumbering the number of people living in the city, which basically means they do factor in the tourists also. Its efforts in reducing car usage have made it a global model for sustainable urban living. Which city are we talking about? So we had the gentleman in the third row raising his hand first.
He's the oldest exceller in the group, so he's been given the chance.
The city is Copenhagen. Denmark is the country.
Okay, what do you think? Is it the right answer? Okay, the gentleman in the first row, he raised his hand next.
I thought it was Paris.
No.
Amsterdam.
Correct. Moving on to the second question. CEO of this leading electric vehicle manufacturer frequently tweets about Mars exploration. His company is significantly reducing emissions with solar and battery technologies. Which company is this? The hint lies within the question, if you heard it correctly. Yeah.
Mahindra?
No.
It's Tesla.
Who spoke? From where? Yeah, Tesla is the right answer. So this is a petition to bring Elon Musk himself for the next edition. So the third question for the day. So we are talking about a country again. This country is home to a unique floating solar farm that generates clean energy on reservoirs, preventing evaporation and doubling as an innovative climate solution. Notably, they were the first to have this technology being implemented successfully. It also boasts as one of the world's greenest cities with vertical gardens and eco-architecture. Which country is this? Okay, so we had the lady at the back raising her hand first.
Is it Singapore?
True. So since the jury is taking a little more time, I do have a few more questions. Okay, so let's come back closer to home. This Indian player in energy and renewable energy space has committed to making its operations carbon neutral by 2030. While there are a lot of corporations who've done this, we are talking about a player who's in the energy and renewable energy space. And I don't see any hands up, which is amusing because a lot of us are associated to XLRI Jamshedpur.
I'm thinking it's ONGC, but I'm not sure.
They also have, but they've committed to a different pledge, to the OGDC pledge.
This is
Tata. Yeah.
It's Tata Power.
It's Tata Power, yes. So we have the jury back with the results of round one, and I would hand over the stage back to Mr. Nair to take it forward for round two.
Just leave the pen here. So we had a wonderful first round. So we'll go to the second round, and we'll wait for the results a little bit later. So let me now call on the second two teams for the debate. The first team is Bell Curve, represented by Gyanan Sri Chenna and Anshi Pandey. And the second team is Optimus, represented by Bhavesh Chaturvedi and Pramit Kumar Das. Both teams are from XLRI Jamshedpur. The first team speaks for the government. The second team speaks for the opposition. You can adjust your mics so that you're speaking to the mic. So, here we start the second round. The topic for the debate is that the government would move. The House believes ethical decarbonization is the way forward for organizations. So let me now call on the Prime Minister to introduce the motion.
Good evening to one and all present here. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Today I'm here to speak in favor of the topic, ethical decarbonization is the way forward for organizations. Going into a little bit of what this means, ethical decarbonization is the process of reducing carbon emissions in a way that not only achieve environmental goals, but also address the social and moral responsibilities of the organizations. In our speeches, we'll be focusing on 3 areas: market systems, externalities, and opportunity costs. Let me tell you a story. Imagine a farmer near a river who uses its fertile banks to grow crops, generating significant profits. Over time, he fences off the river, barring access to others from the same. Those unable to use the river's resources do not make the same profits and might seek employment at his estate. This creates somewhat of a monopoly, allowing exploitation under the guise of efficiency. As legal systems evolved, they began protecting individuals from such exploitation. Yet, public goods like river, air, forests, etc., are still vulnerable and are still exploited. This led to pollution as an externality. We came up with market-based solutions to solve the same, but these systems would also prioritize economic efficiency over ethics. Here, we are asking if the end justify the means. Decarbonization efforts today involve trade-offs. The trade-offs that are going to risk replicating the very systems that had first created pollution as an externality. Our entire contention over here is that whether we are willing to exchange one trade-off, that is the pollution, for another, that is ethical implications. We know that organizations move as per the market. They are profit-driven. They are incentive-driven. Let's consider Nike in the 1990s. It faced backlash over child labor and poor working conditions, which prompted boycotts and scrutiny. To recover, it had to adopt strict practices to make sure that the supply chains were transparent, their labor practices were justified. This is one instance where the market drove you towards ethical mechanisms. What we are suggesting over here is, as pollution as an externality is getting targeted, soon enough, ethical considerations will be as well. The message over here is, the cost of inaction now will far outweigh the investment of doing things right. And if the companies do not move forward with this motion, the time when these trade-offs come under scrutiny, they will face backlash. Finally, let us explain what ethical considerations really mean. Take solar panels, for example, which were produced in Xinjiang in China, and polysilicon, which was a key material used, was being sourced unethically, which involved labor practices that were exploitative. All of these put a lot of light into ethical considerations that take place when you're talking about sustainability. I'll be concluding with this thought right now, while my deputy will take it forward. Decarbonization demands enormous cooperation. My question is, are we really going to let go of the burden of cooperation just because we think that the cost of using things ethically will outweigh it? Are we ready to face a future that will be uncertain, and are companies going to let go of this as a trade-off? Thank you.
Thank you. Now let me just call on the leader of the opposition for against the motion.
Wonderful. May I begin? Yes. Making sure I'm audible once again. Yep. So I'll structure my speech in this way. Firstly, I'll do some extraneous rebuttals to PM's speech. The issue I have with their case is that decarbonization is equated to sustainability. These are two separate things, panel. Decarbonization is about reducing emissions. It's not got nothing to do with the supply chain. It's got nothing to do with where you're sourcing your material from. It has to do with emissions. When we break emissions down, there's scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. That is to say, what is directly generated by the company, what is generated by power purchase, and what is generated by the consumers. So the issue then with PM's case so far is the allegory of the river does not necessarily substantiate what they are trying to say. I'll move on to now our constructives and our definitions. So one thing that is missed out in PM's speech is the definition of the way forward. The motion verbatim, is that ethical decarbonization is the way forward for organizations. So the way forward means that is the immediate next step. Secondly, organizations, although implicit, is referred to as private entities. So our main push is that instead of decarbonization, even ethical decarbonization being the need of the hour, it is actually scope 3 emissions and the government ambit to decide what exactly counts as ethical decarbonization. We bring this to you through 3 main constructives. The first one being trust. If we look at the actors in this, what does this mean? As per PM's definition, it means achieving environmental sustainability through social and moral backing. So that means that the most vulnerable stakeholder is the one that we have to look after. That is to say, tribesmen on the edge of a mine, rural communities who may live near a factory. Now, the most vulnerable stakeholder in this case has no trust for a company. How can you trust an entity that has come, built a large institution where you spent your generations working, and now is saying, hey, we know that we've made a mistake, but now we want to give this back to you ethically. That delta of change is not going to happen because there is no trust between these two parties and there will be no consent reached. This will simply devolve into procedural justice and finger pointing. However, the actor being the government instead of corporates in this case would be a much better way to go forward as they have that astroturfing and that ground level analysis of what the most vulnerable stakeholder would want. Moving on to our second constructive, relevance. Here, I'd like to introduce the concept of planetary boundaries. As per scientific research, there are 9 key areas in which sustainability must move forward. Decarbonization falls under the bucket of climate change, which is only in the area of concern. However, there are 3 more, much more pressing matters. For example, biodiversity change, biogeochemical flows changing, so on and so forth. And this is where companies can actually come in and create actionable movement. For example, their core competencies coming from their work and production processes. Why not focus on that? Why not focus on technological changes? Lastly, the idea of urgency. The concept of ethical decarbonization means letting the most vulnerable stakeholder do what they do. For example, this can be slash and burn agriculture. This could be exploiting a river, even if in non-sustainable ways, because sustainability is the concept of the privileged. This is not going to be known by everyone. So if we let them continue in this way, as per the ambit of, quote, ethical, unquote, decarbonization, the most vulnerable stakeholder will then be affected in the long term, because all we are doing is pacing up climate change. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Leader of Opposition. So I would now call on the Deputy Prime Minister to cement the government's argument. Your time starts.
Great. Can I start? Am I audible? Yeah. Good evening. As the Deputy, I would like to further take this debate in favor of the tabled agenda. I will now be focusing on what is it in for the organizations to move towards ethical means of decarbonization. We have took note of the opponent's point here that the organizations only refer to companies. But when we say organizations, they are not just limited to companies. When we say NGOs, they are organizations. Government is an organization. In fact, international frameworks are organizations. So we'll be discussing 2 main points here. 1, we are discussing organizations which are not just companies. 2, we are talking about the way forward. And the first step is acknowledging that these gaps will exist and we have to address them. Allow me to elaborate. Over the years, we've seen market shift towards sustainability, where green is not only valuable, but essential. From the rise of superfoods to electronic vehicle revolutions, businesses which fail to adopt to sustainability will face dire consequences. For instance, if Bajaj Auto does not adopt to sustainable EV vehicles at this point, it will risk losing $16 billion worth of market. We love painting pictures. And so now I would like to give you another story. Let's zoom out into a macro picture. Say country X. It invests heavily in manufacturing solar panels. Its exports of these panels makes most of its economic value. But here's the twist. The primary buyers of these solar panels are countries like EU, which respect ethics, which prioritize ethical sourcing. If it emerges that the country X uses exploitative labor or environmentally harmful practices, it risks losing its market to country Y. Say country Y also produces equal amounts of solar panels, but countries like EU would prefer country X, obviously. The EU, if you see the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, it shows that the people are ready to pay a premium. It's not far-fetched to imagine ethical consideration occupying a similar space in global trade soon. What does this mean for country X? If it fails to build an ethical ecosystem for decarbonization, it risks losing long-term damage, especially if the world becomes ready to pay another premium. Now, going back to the topics, as stated previously, an organization broadly defined as any group of people working towards a common goal. This includes companies, governments, municipalities, and even international frameworks. Hence, the responsibility of ethical decarbonization does not solely lie with companies, as the opponent pointed out. It must seep at every level of the system. Our second focus is the way forward. The cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of change. As our leader stated previously, let me take some numbers here. Say Africa, 25% of the overall income depends upon exports, while some countries like Congo has 35% of the GDP comes from mining. So mining under pressure to decarbonization faces significant ethical challenges. Now let me, as the opponent pointed out here, that the decarbonization and supply chain have no relation at all. Decarbonization is absolutely related to supply chain. When we talk of decarbonization, the process involves using technology, and the technology comes from obtaining at some places, and this place creates the supply chain. If you source from Xinjiang, which is China, which is the major source of, which is the major city that produces solar panels, Xinjiang shared such resources unethically, then aren't you part of unethical supply chain? Aren't this whole thing part of unethical decarbonization? So ethical, with this, I hand over the podium to opponents.
Yeah, so please, thank you for that. Please be wary of the time also. Now let me call on Deputy Leader of the Opposition for his views.
All right. So can I start?
Yes.
All right. So while we can have debates around ethical decarbonization, and I thank the government for proposing the motion, but I think so we need to set a certain context. The context here being it's 2024, and because of decades, if not centuries of climate inaction and injustice that has been done to the nature, we have a crisis going on, and the crisis is being felt in real time. We have cases of fisher communities in Bangladesh and across Southeast Asia facing the impact of climate injustice. We have entire sovereign states like Tuvalu spread across Polynesia who are under the threat of being submerged because of climate inaction and injustice. Same case can be seen in Africa, in the Sahel region, or in the Southeast Asia. So now what I want to say is that by introducing ethical decarbonization and by involving stakeholders whom we all need to be on the same page, we are actually delaying climate justice and climate action. We are slowing the progress towards carbon neutrality. We are living at a time when countries across the world, be it developed countries or developing countries, we have all set ambitious net neutrality goals. We have ambitious carbon emission goals. And I think so by delving into something that involves a lot of legislation and a lot of regulation, we are actually delaying our own goals. Now, coming to the fact that climate change impacts are immediate. We cannot introduce a more regulatory framework, which will probably take another decade or so to have clear-cut guidelines for corporates to adhere to. And by this time, what I believe is that we are letting go of these corporates by doing, because it has been decades of regulation that has brought these corporates to finally do something for the climate. And now by involving a rather more complicated mechanism, we might as well delve more into the greenwashing attempts by most of these corporates. Every year, in every report, we might hear from the corporates saying that, we are reaching out to all the stakeholders and we will be working out a solution for something. And the solutions might never see the, light of the day. So I think so. Ethical decarbonization, while in theory is a good practice, and also we are not against ethical decarbonization, but our counter proposal is something that the companies need to work more towards scope 3 emissions. They need to do something which the world and the nature needs right now. Now, I also want to say that the world today needs efforts on war footing level, and let us take the case of India, wherein Adani and several other corporates have set up ambitious targets to scale up solar energy production and several other plants. But if we delve deeper into what the vulnerable communities, what the marginalized communities around there, or what the local panchayats or every other stakeholder thinks about it, we might actually let Adani and every other corporate get away with doing the climate action and doing the climate justice that they're showing now. They're putting the money right now, they're making efforts, and this process can derail the entire conversation. Secondly, we have an overemphasis on procedural justice now instead of the distributive justice. The Prime Minister mentioned that do the end justify the means. What I want to say is that if we delay climate action right now, the end and the means both lead to vulnerable communities being affected, vulnerable communities being displaced. If we delay climate action now, the marginalized communities are anyway going to face the brunt of the climate inaction. But if we make and step up our efforts now, I know it's a big trade-off to make, but also it also leads to the communities staying in their own homelands and protected against climate-based inaction. Lastly, I want to end by saying that vulnerable communities will bear the cost either way. So instead of delving into this debate, I believe that we should put more stringent regulations on the corporates to do more action on a war footing scale, and that's where I end the proposition.
Thank you. For the final comments by the Prime Minister.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for giving me this floor. You know, the story that I started with was a very basic story that I had learned years ago when we were studying economics, how economic systems evolved. I wonder when the economic systems started evolving in the first place, did such discussions take place? The need to elevate people from poverty is real time. Let go of what the problems are in terms of externalities. Let's focus on the profits right now so that we can employ more people. Let's focus on what can be done right now, and we'll deal with what comes later. This is what I gathered from the speech that was just said by the Deputy Minister. I do agree that climate action is something that needs to be dealt with in real time. And that is why at no point during our debates did we say that the current initiatives that are being taken place should be stopped. What we are proposing is something that runs in tandem. You see, if we let go of the ethical considerations at this stage, when we're talking about supply chains that go globally, when you're talking about decarbonization, what does it really mean? It means you want to try and achieve a net zero carbon emission, that you're trying to make your practices more green. And how do you do that? As my deputy had mentioned, you do that through obtaining technology, through obtaining resources that will help you in that path. Now, what if I tell you that where you're sourcing it from, that place is producing it in an unethical manner? What does this unethical really means? It means poor working conditions. It means extraction. It means pollution. It means destruction. This is a beast that we are talking about. Pollution was one, and now we are tackling the same. The trade-offs that I kept trying to mention is that if you let go of ethical consideration, if you let go of this very discussion right now, in the future, will you be able to tackle it? Will the world that has been supposedly completely decarbonized, when you look back to how that happened, will you be able to go back to that distributive justice? Another very beautiful point to illustrate over here is ethics. That's what we are talking about. It is a very tough thing to implement. It is very hard for asking someone to let go of certain percentage of profits because we want that cost to go into ethical considerations. This needs to start now. Right now, there's an emerging market in terms of green technology. There's an emerging market in terms of decarbonization. I had not even heard of this word 5 years ago, and here I am debating on it. So when the topic is green and when the topic is prevalent everywhere, why not talk about the trade-offs? The examples that we had illustrated, that's just one. Nike had been doing that in 1990s. I'm sure there are companies that are still doing the same. To wind down, I would like to mention just one more thing. We understand that ethical decarbonization is a collective responsibility. That means that systems need to be put into place. That takes time. Governments need to act, companies need to act, individual consumers also need to be ready to pay a premium at some point. Inculcate those habits from now. Teach accordingly. And please, do not call this debate off just because the problem that we are tackling is in real time. Call this debate into motion because the problem that we'll be tackling in the future would be way harder to solve. It's a monster. It needs to be killed. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me now call on the Leader of Opposition for the final comments.
Okay, so panel, it seems House proposition enjoys stories, enjoys tugging at your heartstrings, enjoys the fact that ethical seems to only lie on their paradigm when this is not the case. When our whole case pushes the fact that the most vulnerable stakeholder is the one affected on their side, we see no engagement. When we talk about urgency and relevance, we see no engagement. What we see is the story of the river. Then I can bring you my own story. In the game of fencing, there are rules. There's a tip on the edge of the sword or the knife. But if you take that tip off, issues will happen. This is the issue that has happened with Proposition's case. Because in the middle of the speech, there is a sudden redefinition of organization, which is then not taken up again. If you are telling me that organizations mean frameworks, which mean NGOs, then you also need your case to explain why that is relevant. That has not happened in the 3 speeches that I've heard. So when I come to my adjudication of how this debate went, I see that an attempt was made to squirrel the debate. I see that side proposition has definitely won the clash of ethical sourcing. Yes, ethical sourcing should happen, but that is not the same thing as ethical decarbonization panel. And that's why we want to bring up 3 clashes. Number 1, the delta of change. Where is more change happening? On our side, clearly. Why? Because we told you that if you want ethical decarbonization to happen, there's going to be so much discussion on what it means, for which stakeholder is it relevant, and that's going to get stuck in bureaucracy and red tapeism. On our side, we have explained explicitly that the core competencies of companies lie in making their production systems more efficient, making them generate less waste, which is what ethical decarbonization is attempting to do. So that clash is clearly one. Second, the idea of urgency or relevance. Let me look at Proposition's case from a best case, worst case scenario. Best case, yes, they are able to do ethical decarbonization and they're able to solve a problem. That is an important problem, but is not the most relevant problem right now. The framework of planetary boundaries is not some mishmash that has been thought up in the last 5 years. It's a scientific framework that took decades to develop and which made us realize that waste generation is a lot more important and a lot more impactful, especially for people who do not have a voice. So on that front, we also believe that opposition wins the clash. And the third, who receives help? So looking at the story of country X, who is going to receive help? This would be limited only to, let's say, the factory workers in that unethical solar factory. It will not then extend to the world at large. That is to say, what we have spoken about, the long-term impact of if you only focus on one specific thing, the issue happening. My respected DLO brought up the point of fishing communities. Sure, if you do ethical decarbonization and you respect their rights at this present moment, that doesn't mean that in the next 10 or 20 years, you are able to save them from rising sea levels, from changes in salinity, and other issues which the boardroom will never hear nor care about. So on that front, we also believe opposition wins the case. Harking back to PM's speech, there was a touch upon the hidden costs of using nature. That is to say, the rivers, the forests, so on and so forth. Now, the only companies that are able to successfully do decarbonization are very recent. Number 1, the Ambatovi mine in Madagascar. How did they do this? They did this by explaining to farmers in their vicinity that slash and burn agriculture will not work. That is to say, impacting the lives of stakeholders in a way that may be considered morally dubious. But in the long run, would these farmers not have had to change regardless? Would they not have to move to more sustainable practices? The answer is a resounding yes. And that is why we believe our model takes over proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both the teams for a wonderful debate. You can just step down while we just find out the results.
So let's have a huge round of applause for all the 4 teams who came up on the stage today and spoke their minds out and made sense while doing it. So let's have a huge round of applause again for all the 4 finalist teams. Now, while the jury deliberates on who makes it to the final bout we are going to witness next, let us all put our thinking hats and discuss something close to the theme today, that is environmental stewardship. We will next have a panel discussion for which the stage is being set up. So I would move closer to you all, and we would want to hear the audience's opinion on the topics I'm going to present next. Would any of the students here want to come forward and share their view on how academic institutions play a pivotal role in shaping a green curriculum? Any volunteers? Even the volunteers can volunteer. Yeah. Professors too. So we have a volunteer there. So we want to listen about what are your views on how academic institutions play a pivotal role in shaping a green curriculum. Go ahead. I started off with the students, and while the mic is getting ready, I would definitely love to hear the opinions from the other side of the table. The esteemed members from the industry, our esteemed alumni who are here, you see all of us joining your organizations. And what would you like to have us be aware of when we are joining right out of our colleges? So while we listen to her views, we'll come to you next.
Hi, So I'm a student of IIM Lucknow, and there are 2 things that I'd like to point out. Firstly, that IIM Lucknow is one of the only institutions in India that has a full-fledged program called PGP for Sustainability Management, which means they have a 2-year full-fledged program on MBA teaching how future managers can lead the sustainability efforts in every aspect of business, whether it's operations, whether it's finance, organizational behavior, and so on. And second is that IIM Lucknow has a Center for Sustainability, which acts like a think tank, where they do a lot of cutting-edge research, publish papers, and so on. We have very renowned faculty who are doing this, who are bringing out very practical applications of sustainability and so on. So IIM Lucknow is a very prime example of how a leading academic institution can lead the sustainability agenda. Thank you.
That is great. Now let's hear from the other side of the table. What do you think students in B schools today should be focusing on in terms of green curriculum along with their regular curriculum? Anybody? Anybody would like to share their views? Yeah, we have a person here, and we have one more. So we have 2 people who want to share their views.
Okay, so
Can we get the mics here, this side?
I would just like to say, except for the curriculum, I think academic institutions also need to focus on being an eco-friendly and sustainable institution itself. I think curriculums in school to some point still have sustainability and green goals as a part of their books and syllabus. But I'm a first-year college student, so as far as I've seen, I don't think colleges are really integrating it as much as they should. And apart from just the study point of view, I think just having a green initiative on campus, like energy efficient buildings or, sustainable transport, I think that's very important as well. That's it. Thank you.
So to me, the real change will happen when every student understands daily changes in their lives. It's not a department, like say in a corporation, in an organization, it's not a CSR department whose headache it is. in an institution, it's not like she said in IIM Lucknow, there's a special program. It is what each and every one of us does. In the panels, there was a lot of talk about consuming resources and reducing waste. So on that point, let me be like the boy in the emperor's new clothes and say that in a conference on environmental stewardship, what are those mineral bottles doing there? We're talking about ocean plastic. So I'm going to ask all those of you who have your bottles, can you raise it? Till we all get into the habit of carrying our own water and say no, or that the water served in tumblers, which is zero waste. So I'm saying a checklist of everything that we do every day so we can avoid generating waste, we can reduce the resources we consume. I heard that word eco-friendly. I'll wind up in a minute, but I just want to say it's the worst word possible because a lot of people shift to what they call eco-friendly materials like the biodegradable arachnut plates. Then it's dumped with paper cups and half bottles of mineral water tied in a plastic bag and sent to landfill as mixed waste. So reducing waste to landfill is, till that becomes a goal of everyone on every campus, I don't think we'll get anywhere. But I hope all of you who heard this today are going to go back to your campuses and saying, hey, we need to really be zero waste all the time. I am Odette Katrak. If you thought I speak sense, please follow the volunteer group. It is an XLRI backed at beautifulbharat.org. Thank you.
Completely echoing with your thoughts, ma'am, that it's reduce, reuse, recycle, followed by buying eco-friendly products. We have sir who's going to, we have a gentleman here who's going to say some of his thoughts next.
So just one thought I had actually. Again, when we look at whether it's a center of excellence, a 2-year separate course, it's again pushing sustainability as a siloed approach. Today, sustainability has become integral to every function. So I think time has come where we revisit the pedagogy, we revisit the content, and how do we dovetail sustainability into the core courses that we are actually teaching or learning at. That's what my suggestion would be.
So just to give the jury some context on what's happening here, because I can see some confused faces. So while we are waiting for the panel discussion to start, we thought we'll take the discussion to the audience who've heard our team so far. And we were discussing how green curriculum is the next step of incorporating the future leaders into the sustainable efforts that our corporations are leading. And we've had opinions on both sides, that there should be some specialized courses, some dedicated courses, and like what sir mentioned right now, that we should have sustainability or environmental stewardship as a concept integrated or dovetailed into the core curriculum. Because till they are being talked about separately, they remain separate, but it's a unified way of moving forward which is needed right now. Okay, so I had another such topic which I wanted to bring up today, that we all talk about taking the ownership. But do we have people here who've, led innovative sustainability practices in their own capacity, be it students in their colleges or leaders in their firms, professors in their colleges? So anybody who would want to come up and proudly share what they've done in the past, any initiative, big or small, it's the initiative and it's the thought and it's the first step that matters. So we have a volunteer there.
Thank you. So let me confess first that before going to Excel, I never thought of all these things. So I remember the very first day when I was about to enter the campus. At the gate, I was familiar with XLRI, that name, but the next thing was for the greater good. And at that time, I literally realized what I'm going to be once I'll come out of the campus. So what I feel that these days we are morely number-centric. We always talk about the numbers, profits. The empathy is somewhere lacking. When we talk about the balance sheet, we only talk about, okay, how many assets we have built up, what is our earning per share. But rather, it's important, definitely. But in addition to that, we should have empathy developed towards the environment, towards our people around us. in my personal capacity, I've stopped using any of the plastic bottles in my home. It will be either steel or a glass. We try to reuse as much as possible whatever daily use product we have. And I would like to take the credit, give the credit to my wife. She forces me a lot that she's from the legal space, and she tells me a lot that why it is very important for us to be responsible citizens. I would like to take some snippets from the debate as well. They were talking about someone take the side of the government, some from the private. I feel that we cannot draw a very strict line between these two, because when Indian government has a vision of net zero by 2070, and when they say that we want to have a 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030, it cannot be done by single corporation, single government, single person. And that was the reason why in 1992 when we went for the liberalization, because the government knew that they cannot solely build the responsibility of these things. A country with 150 crore people is the responsibility of all of us. And somewhere it's a trade-off. When you want to grow economically, there's a trade-off happens where some degradation will happen. But keeping in mind that there should not be a situation from where we cannot turn back. So definitely it's the responsibility of each of us to work for the environment and think for the economic growth as well.
Echoing with what you said, collective is the way to go. And there's a very famous African saying also that the right time to plant a tree was already 20 years back. And with that, I would say that we'll come back to this discussion, but we have our panelists and our moderator ready. We have an intriguing panel discussion lined up next. I now invite... Okay, so before we go on to that, we have the results. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's something which we are all eagerly waiting for. So I have this two wonderful rounds of the intense debate, and finally the two final teams for today evening is ready. The first team is Gregorius SG from IIM Lucknow. Give them a big hand. I would like one of your team member to come onto the stage. And the second team is Optimus from XLRI Jamshedpur. I would request one member from the team to come onto the stage. Now, these two teams are going to going for the final round. So we need to have a small toss to find out who is going to speak for and who is going to speak against for the final motion. So you can toss and you can call. One of you. You toss and call. So the guy who gets the call right is for the for.
Oh no, I can't choose.
You can choose. He tosses. You can choose. If you win, you are the one for the for.
Oh, okay. So it's still luck based.
Huh.
Okay.
You call, you get right.
Heads.
That's tails. So you go for against, and he goes for for. That's it. Now we can do that. So that's the end of it. You can take over.
So if I remember correctly, now the tables have turned. They were speaking in the opposite capacity. So let's see what's coming up. And I would again like to invite our panel moderator, Ms. Mugdha Kalra. She's an award-winning journalist, a fierce advocate for inclusion, and a storyteller par excellence. Ms. Kalra will lead a riveting discussion on mitigating climate impact and role of businesses as a stakeholder. Ms. Mugdha, the stage is all yours.
I was almost thinking हमारे discussion के लिए तो कुछ छोड़ा ही नहीं है आप लोगों ने. फिर audience भी बोलने लगी. Then everybody, and I was like, what are we going to discuss? All right. Great, thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction and having me here. It's always a pleasure to be part of this initiative because you actually meet some really enterprising young leaders. It is also a lesson in the new wokeness and how that is getting translated into activism and how it is getting translated into work and culture. apart from that, it also is very helpful to see where they are coming from, what's in their minds when they are thinking of something as important as climate change today. But otherwise, even the subjects that we had taken in the past with the debates have been an eye-opener, because you see a very different world that they are perhaps projecting, and it's always great to see when they actually get their hands dirty and they come in the corporates, how much of that will remains, how much of that activism sort of survives in the professionalism, quote unquote. So it's always very interesting, but it's great to see that that there is that fire, at least at this stage, because अगर अभी यहाँ नहीं होगी तो फिर कहाँ होगी, and that's the hope. With that, welcome to the panel, and I'm dying to have my panelists here. Put your hands together for Radhika Kaniganti, ESG Lead, Wipro Limited. Nalini Shekhar, co-founder, Hasi Rudala. Saisha Dogra, founder, The Climate Party. And the lucky gentleman on the panel, Mr. Santosh Jairam, sustainability advocate and professor. All set. So there has already been a lot of discussion on mitigating climate impacts, the role of business as a stakeholder. You have heard a lot of opinions already, both for and against. We have almost touched all the themes that we are going to be discussing on this panel, and over the last few months, I believe everybody has been debating on similar lines, and so the student community, I feel, already is very abreast with what is happening in the world. Also with COP29 that has just ended, there's already been a lot of chatter around it, what worked, what did not work, implications of the US elections, etc. But today, when we are starting to talk about this, I want the focus entirely on India, and also not just on those listed companies, but also on the unlisted companies, also on business at large, because what we are seeing is that 90% of our dhanda is coming from these MSMEs, SMEs, and are they going through that change, which is extremely difficult to adapt or to look at when suddenly you are going to get listed and then you are moving backwards and changing the way you work, or you're not equipped enough, or you have not worked with the vendors and participants that share your combined vision. So let me first start with the corporates, and Santosh, gentlemen first. My first question to you is on the same lines as what the young leaders have been debating about, which is compliance versus corporate responsibility on its own. I do believe in regulation and compliance, because if there wasn't a Company Act, we women would never have been on boards. So from that point of view, I feel thoda danda zaruri hai. And but having said that, when we are talking about regulatory frameworks, when we are talking about compliance, one thing that I hear across the industry is there are laws, there are frameworks, but there are way too many. Are we moving in a direction where this is likely to get simplified? Is it not overwhelming for corporates to be filling multiple ESG reports and somewhere getting lost in it? What are the challenges with the regulatory compliance?
First of all,
It'll be on.
Regulations.
So let me take a step back. Regulation, the purpose of regulation, if I understand correctly, is to align the private behavior to the public interest. So I think that's
a
how
great
the
definition.
whole regulation is about. So it is required. As you rightly said, even in the sustainability world, the regulation is required. Let's look at the reporting, since your question is about reporting. Let me go into that. Before, and we are at the cusp of things. Actually, it has been in the last 2 years that the whole reporting arena is moving from voluntary to regulatory.
Right.
And whether it is the EU or whether it is the in India, it is kind of moving in a higher direction in India. The key change there is, one, it brings in a higher level of accuracy and reliability. It brings in a higher level of comparability. Now let me tell you why I say this. Is in the voluntary times, I have consulted most of the companies, but since it's Bangalore, I can relate it to the IT companies. There used to be a parameter which people report, which is basically attrition. Okay? It is one of the key indicators. Each company I used to consult had a definition of their own. First company said that it is a simple calculation, year starting, year end, average. Then somebody said, throughout the year we add 25,000 people. So it cannot be a year, it will be a monthly weighted average. Third one said, we do not count attrition if they leave before 6 months. So now you have each one of them saying attrition is this percentage, and you are an analyst who are looking at these numbers, putting a chart to, is it comparable? Now when BRSR came in, you clearly defined, you put a formula to it, and you told the companies, this is how you report. So it becomes comparable, and then you brought in assurance, so it becomes more reliable. So that way, the whole of the regulation is improving the data around all these things in a higher degree, one. The second one is, the whole of BRSR, if you really look at it, is templatized. It's simple box.
Templatized.
And what you are doing is, even with XBRL, now you are supposed to report on an XBRL format, which is a digital format. If there is a percentage to be added there, you can add only a percentage. You cannot add anything else. You cannot put a star and explain it. No, it's not allowed. It's templatized. What this does is, it completely takes out greenwashing. Otherwise, you had these sustainability reports where the companies wanted to talk about the good things in a big manner, the moderate things in a lesser manner, and forget about many things. So with this version, what happens is that you have an XBRL format. Let me take again the IT companies. Now with XBRL came out, it has become very easy for data analytics. I recently had one of the friend who did an analytics. He said that, for example, in terms of diversity. Diversity, as you expect, the percentages are good in IT industry. But there was a surprising thing. The pay parity, that sector lagged from other sectors. Now, did you ever think of this? Now, that's the power when you have that kind of data coming in and the digital format coming in. Even in EU also, the digital format is a must. So you are, with this regulation, you are getting into an era of a huge amount of sustainability information which is going to be out there. And it has its own risk to the corporates. Because the way it is going to be diced, analyzed is a risk to the companies because they do not have any other way to put it. You cannot put a greater graph or you cannot have an explanation as to why your performance has gone bad, nothing. Because you don't have the provisions for that.
Right.
So that's where the regulation is going to help.
But that's a great way of looking at it, that frameworks are required with AI, Gen AI, with other kind of tools that are coming. I'm guessing even the sustainability reportage is also going to become even more sophisticated, where there is very less chance of greenwashing. But if I have to get the corporate side in, I do know companies spend a lot of time, energy, manpower in these ESG reportage. If I were to ask, for a solution, of simplifying it, what could be an industry ask?
Okay, so I would like to just step back a little bit. 20 years, actually. So when we look at a company like Wipro, for example, their sustainability journey started way back, like, in 2000, right? So, and it started off, of course, with, philanthropy, and then moved on to, business sustainability. So it was kind of organic, as Santosh has mentioned. I mean, it kind of grew. It started with environmental, then, well-being, HR, and things like that, CSR. Excuse me. So now the reporting, I mean, of course, Wipro submitted its first GRI report in 2007. And as Santosh has said, I mean, of course, we reported what we, what we did, and we did a lot of good things even back then. But today, when the BRSR has come out, the kind of parameters that have been asked, so they're kind of nuanced. Right, they're nuanced from what we actually do. So while Wipro does a lot of things, the way the information is asked in BRSR is a little bit different. I'll give you an example. Well-being, for example. So GRI puts well-being as part of occupational health and safety, right? And BRSR looks at well-being in terms of insurance, parental leave, and things like that. So yes, so it's just it's the same KPI, if you will, it's the same parameter, but reported differently. So that kind of, I mean, it puts corporates in a situation where you have to report differently for different. So if we are publishing a GRI report and a BRSR, so we are looking at the same KPI, but publishing it differently. So that puts a little bit of additional burden on corporates. And I think we have a lot more regulations coming in from the EU, and so which is going to increase. But I think what we're looking at is what happened to maybe the financial sector a few years ago, right? I mean, it's a lot of reporting, requirements. We expect that to sort of settle. Come to some kind of a, normal, if you will. And all this is good. I think it is good that there are, this sort of leveling kind of, ways for, these parameters to level out across organizations. It's good that these frameworks are available and very clear, and, so corporates know what to report on. And with the additional requirement of assurance, that there cannot be greenwashing. So I think all this is good. And while we may experience a little bit of reporting burden and reporting fatigue in the near term, we expect that to sort of level out in a few years. And I think, it's all going to be for the good.
Back when we were discussing our points, Aisha made a very interesting comment about, and this is one thing that I was also discussing at another panel where we were talking about capability, capacity, and innovation building and culture building. And everybody there was also bringing the same thing which you said, which is now no longer people and departments can work in silos. You can't have a sustainability officer who has been handling finance and is trying to make sustainability sound good on numbers. Right? You need people from where the merit lies in them understanding the business. What were some of the thoughts, if you could share with us, that, now sustainability also cannot just rest with one department, but, it is pan-organization?
Yeah, so I think since we were talking about regulation and both Santosh and Radhika brought on the reporting points, right? And you started with, there are a lot of regulations. I was actually thinking, are there enough regulations? Because, from, again, this was a reporting point, but for example, only now has the government come out with guidelines under the Consumer Protection Act, which actually talk about giving a hard time to corporates in their usage of terms like sustainability, eco-friendly, and anything that was exactly. So now, only now have those guidelines come. Actually, just probably a month ago, I guess. But until now, and it's as good as if I were to equate it with the whole revolution we see around reading labels on food, right? Where the front is anything and everything that the corporate wants to tell you, but the reality is on the backside, right? So, and again, Nalini might be able to talk more about EPR guidelines. So now there are a lot of EPR guidelines. I mean, EPR guidelines have been there for a while, but in terms of compliance, how much action is actually being taken? So I think because she's been in waste management, so she'd have more insights there. But like I think regulation coming in is essentially shifting a baseline where the status quo doesn't work. And of course, change is hard. And like we were talking about how sustainability function in large corporates has, as legacy been put on people who were reporting, which is essentially the finance folks. So everybody will take time to shift. And as Radhika was mentioning, you suddenly, given so many tasks. And, this organization I was talking to, again, a listed insurance company, where to meet all those reporting guidelines, they have to talk to so many departments where the data lies in different formats, and for them to get the data that they need in the format they require is such a big challenge that they reached out to us to figure out how can we change basic culture around how employees think about sustainability.
No, I think it's, as you said, it's change is always tough. And that's the reason why we see that in a lot of countries, in India, we are very open to accepting tech. But look at countries like Japan that are closed, they're very risk averse. If you travel to Japan, you will see that the amount of tech penetration in the society is very less, while they are making very cutting edge products. And it all boils down to the psyche, the mentality of people. And even when we are talking about sustainability, there are a lot of people who say sustainability also comes at a cost. And all of these things come at a cost. So, are we in a place where we can think about things like degrowth? Are we in a place where we talk about the cost of sustainability in the short term, in the long term? And I think companies are thinking that amidst the change of working with pan-generational people, and where ageism unfortunately also comes in. So we have a lot of things that are on the floor when we talk about a culture change in an organization. So we discussed compliance, we discussed about reportage, we're talking about a change, departments coming together. But from your experience, I want to know that this is all listed companies we are talking about, where the bulk of the work is also happening in the disorganized, unorganized, not so organized market, where there are huge companies, there are vendors who are working with these big companies. There are no regulations, so to say, there. Of course, we need regulation there. There are no two, there shouldn't be any doubt about that. But in your opinion, which are those companies that need intervention? Do we have awareness? What kind of education do they need? Where is this sector standing as of today when it comes to climate change?
So, shifting to manufacturing structure, industry. So, I work with waste pickers, and we have a service organization as a trust, and we also have a company which is providing services. So, when you really look at supply chain, right, I mean, it is unorganized because the cost of making it organized is almost 40% more. That is our experience. So who will bear the cost is the question. It's not about the compliance, not that they don't want to do it, but it's the compliance. So with Hasrudala Innovation, which is a profit organization, we really tried with a few companies, brands, and said, how can we make this, sustainable is one, and also ethical and inclusion. So inclusive circularity, how can we bring that? So it has taken many, many, many years, and happy to say that H&M buttons throughout the world is using the waste that we have given. This is the first time in the world that happened. There's another shampoo company earlier now, which is not there. They use the first, 30% of but this comes at a price. So they had to choose a brand that is selling maximum, where maximum profits are there, to give back. We are the only company in the world which is fair trade marked for waste collection and giving it to the companies. Now, one of the H&M I just mentioned, and HUL has actually put on their, the bottle saying that 50% of this material has come through the innovation. Again, this is the first time in the world. So, but it has taken so many years. When we first go to the visionaries of the organization, wow, it's a great idea, we want to do it. Then you go to the purchase people. They say, no, I want it cheaper. Then you go to the marketing. No, my clients want it better, right? So how do we navigate all these and then fight it? So we were able to do it. H&M was much faster than Unilever, for example. And what we have done is just an example or a demonstration. It's not a huge volumes, right? But at least we have shown them this is possible. This is possible where you are ethically sourcing, where you are really, compliances are met, human rights compliances are met, and it's certified human rights compliances. So it is possible to do, but there is a cost to it. There's a premium for this. So who will bear that cost is a big question. Because there's so much competition out there, everybody wants to make cheaper, products and cheaper packaging, right? So that is where we get stuck as a thing. And we have made a lot of our waste pickers into entrepreneurs now. We have 84 entrepreneurs. Many of them are filing their income tax returns. So these are the people who are on the street on a bag picking up waste, right? So none of them read and write. How did we do it? UPI has really helped us in using it, transaction. And in the beginning, they didn't know how to write. We taught them how to write 1 to 10. And our data management books were this big. Because newly learned people, they write it big. Now they came back to A4 and now they're doing it on the smartphone. So there is a lot of investment to make it formal, right? We have invested 10 years, learned a lot of different new techniques of teaching people who don't read and write, teaching them how the compliance has to be met, right? So there is an investment for making them formal. They're not informal because they don't want to be. It is cost.
It's a very important subject, which is cost of sustainability, cost of awareness, cost of working, cost of changing the functions that are part of your legacy for such a long time. Santosh, where do you see this problem getting solved? Government intervention ki to zarurat hai isme. Where do you see this public-private partnership? Can that work here? Because we are looking at multiple businesses, A, that are raring to go but do not have the funds to align their sustainability goals with the rest of the world. B, if they are ready for it, then they don't have the knowledge and awareness. That's where companies like yours come in and they help. What kind of partnerships are we looking at, and is there nothing more happening that we don't see, or there needs to be done?
No, there are global alliances and partnerships. One she mentioned about fair trade and all those things are there. But let me kind of look at this from an Indian context. When we take pride of the Maruti ad, kitna dega? When we take pride of our ISRO having the cheapest satellites, is there any Indian business model which is not run on cost arbitrage? When your whole business model, whether it is an IT company, whether you are a tire manufacturing company, whether you are an automobile manufacturing company, is there any business model in India which is not run on cost arbitrage, not on value? The key is, if you want to run on value, you have to invest on R&D. Where are Where is the Indian, whether it is the government, whether it is the Indian private sector, who is investing? Until unless the value discussion comes into the business, just as you mentioned, it's a great thought, right at the top level, they are okay, but the moment it comes to the cost. So I think it's basically somewhere in our cultural it has been forced kind of into our things.
Bootstrap हर चीज में करना है.
हर चीज में करना है. तो वो वहाँ पर problem है. It is not about having a kind of a requirement in terms of if sustainability that way, let me put it, as I have been a consultant all through my life, and I am also party to it, is as consultants, when we go and sell our services to companies around sustainability, we all sell it as an opportunity. I tell you, yes, there is little, but there is a bigger thing, there is a cost involved. And that cost has to be borne. And until unless we are ready to kind of accept that inside the business, I think we are not going to move in that particular direction. I come from Kerala. The moment I say this, many people ask me, companies cannot survive there. I said, you have not matured to survive there. Where the minimum wages for a unskilled labor is 850 and for a skilled labor is 1300, which is applied in the sense you cannot shortcut it. Because the unions are pretty strong there. If as a business, you are not mature to operate in that kind of a place. So the other places, there are shortcuts for you. And that's how the survival happens. So I think basically it is about a change that we need to look at, that this comes at a cost and this is something which we have to do to progress sustainability. I think that's where it is. The frameworks would come.
Do you also see regulations that might come with subsidies for businesses like these where they can give them incentives to go green, incentives to perhaps change the way they work?
See, I won't call it as incentives. The problem is that you are not putting the true value of the sustainability initiative. So let me give you green buildings. Green buildings, if you really look at it, energy cost is one part of it. But over the period of the lifetime, the kind of environmental impact which you are creating over the period, if you put a rupee value to that environmental impact, that's going to supersede all the subsidies which you are going to give. So the problem is the total cost to the environment, the total social cost, if you start factoring some of these things as part of your economics. The problem is that you, as the lady over there taught, you are still teaching the old economics theories, you are still teaching the old accounting theories. That's not going to change. Economics has to value the natural capital. Economics has to value the social capital. Once that is done, these incentives are nothing.
All right. Lots to chew on that one. But I must appreciate the candid confession that, while we talk as consultants and when we want to sell sustainability, we always say that sustainability in the long term will give you more profits, and it is being penny wise and pound foolish, but it actually is not, because the cost of sustainability and the cost of tools to be put in that place are much more, and perhaps that needs to be understood in a better format. But awareness at a larger level, I mean, as the young lady from AM Lucknow spoke about a course being in AM Lucknow on sustainability management. Today, if I Google, because I'm also a journalist who was trained in the year 1999-2000, it's now 2024-25. And even if I have to work on equipping myself today with the cutting edge education, I don't see enough and more courses. I don't see enough and more courses that are for working individuals, and they say that, all right, you want to learn about all of this because you are reporting on this, because you are going to talk about it, and this is the course perhaps that can give you an idea, but even I don't see as many courses. So I guess that that education has to be at various levels, and specifically for leaders and managers who can actually look at the larger picture. Having said that, now I want to get your attention on something very interesting, and I want to take Saisha and Radhika, because there's a bit of an experience difference in your work, which is that, Radhika first, as a leader, and I see a lot of leaders sitting here, as a big boss, as a leader, when you talk to your company, I want to do something different, and I want to be more sustainable, and I want to degrowth, and I want to do things that will be remembered as a legacy of the company versus the profitability. How are those bosses and leaders taken? Are they encouraged to, is it all right for them to say something like that, or is it blasphemy? And, is the boss language the profit language? Or what is it? How are these leaders being taken?
You know, you're talking to somebody from Wipro. Okay. So Wipro has sustainability in its DNA, right? And so that question of, that you put in, if I come up with a really innovative, a different solution for sustainability, that is going to cost, and that is, I think it's a...
I reframe it. How easy is it for a guy from Wipro to get into another company at a leadership level with those with those ambitions?
Okay. Well, I think that would be a challenging. But I think, again, like Santosh mentioned, right? It all comes down to how are you going to proposition it? How are you going to, what kind of value are you creating? So, and if you talk in terms of value creation, right? So, you're creating value for your customers, your suppliers, your employees, the planet. And I think it's just, people finally understand value, right? I think it just boils down to that. And today, for example, Wipro has been doing, natural capital valuation for the past 7 years. So where we put an economic value to our environmental footprint, right? And it's possible to do, and this year we started doing it for human capital and social capital. So eventually the bosses are going to understand that language, right? So where are you getting positive capital? Where are you getting negative? And how much is negative, right? So how are you going to balance that out? So I think if you proposition it as a value creation, I think that would be the best way for, the leaders to sort of understand that.
So in the long term, even if the leader is talking like that, it has to make financial sense. So, yeah, you want to chime in?
Ask the question to the panel. One of the traps in this entire debate of sustainability, environment, ethics, and we've been going through that for 2 hours.
Right.
Is we tend to refer to everything in a homo economicus way, boiling down to money. When in India will this stop? When will sustainability be measured as sustainability? When will ethics be measured as ethics? When will environment have its own measurement and not to cost? That's when we have moved forward. Otherwise, we have fallen in line.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point. And, we were bringing it to the last aspect of degrowth when we talk about degrowth, because, there's a lot of chatter around degrowth. And what is the real definition of growth? Or what is the real definition of human economy? Or what is the real is it all related with money? Is it all related with profitability or your GDP? Or, so that is one important subject that we will be raising. But, I want to get, continuing with this thought, Saisha, how easy or difficult is it for a young person to say, I want to do things differently. I'm not aligned with the company's way of working. You had to quit to start your own company to do that. So how easy or difficult is it at that level to do that? And you were working with an e-com business. So tell me, what are the challenges when you meet young people? What are the challenges young people face when, of course, they're more woke than, and I'm using woke as a good thing, all right? So the youngsters, please don't get offended about it, because when an olderish person uses woke, they always feel ki ye to humko kuch sarcastically bol rahe hain. No, but I believe in that wokeism, and I like the fact that this generation is much more invested in what they think strongly about, versus a generation which was chasing things that were asked, of the society for them to chase, like, choosing a company to work with. It was never about, do I ethically align with this company, or, is this company good on my resume, right? So the young, when they are thinking like that, what are the classic challenges that they are facing? I'm sure there is a lot of dilemma and delusion.
So I think talking about, being able to take a stance as to what is my purpose or what do I want to do meaningfully. I think before we get into any of the questions you asked, I would want to acknowledge the fact on behalf of our generation, not everybody, but anybody who's able to take that stance, is we come from some level of privileges, right? Where either we don't have to make, think of making ends meet. We have some level of financial comfort, which gives us that risk-taking capacity to experiment. And for me, honestly, it was more of following a regret minimization framework, where the idea was, later in life, I shouldn't be regretting that I didn't even try, right? And it's, said that you will never regret if you, about anything that you failed at, but you'll mostly regret about something you didn't end up doing, right? Now, coming to the challenges, right? So I see two kinds of people. One are, talking about young people. So one, those who are technically trained, so for example, talking about the I Am Lucknow program, right? In some ways they're trained. And then there are institutions like TERI, TIS. Now, the challenges there have been, having spoken to a lot of students, is that while they want to do a lot of great things, the kind of jobs that come to campus are largely Big Four, reporting-based jobs, right? And because, of course, they've invested in that course, they have to end up working somewhere, right? So a lot of them reluctantly end up taking those jobs. And honestly, a lot of people in my team who volunteer their time with us are people who are working there because they want to find more meaning. Outside of the not so great work that they're doing, right? While all of that is important, but again, they're not finding that value coming out of it, right? Then there's a second set, which is people, who fresh graduates, or people like me, some mid-career professionals, who don't have the technical prowess in this space, and, are largely, I would admit, lost as to where they can fit in. Right? Because what happens with the whole idea of climate and sustainability from the outside is that this space is highly technical, right? Which is true to an extent, but if you think any company, any industry, you need people in finance, you need people in marketing, you need people in branding. So it's about helping people realize their, how can they use their existing skills to
align with.
Exactly. Right? So that's where we've been helping them come together in physical settings with people who are leaders, right from CXOs to mid-management, who can really help them understand that what it takes. Of course, everybody will have to go through some level of upskilling, but a lot of it kind of happens on the job. I wouldn't trivialize that it's easy. But again, when we talk about climate and sustainability, it's a horizontal, right? It contains everything. Right? So there are so many industries you could be working for. So, it's difficult to grasp all of that at once for somebody who's so new, right? And like you were mentioning about lack of, educational opportunity. So it's like they feel that they're swimming against the tide. They want to do something, but don't know where to begin, right? And yeah, so.
That's a fair point as well. Radhika, you wanted to say something?
I had a third kind of students that you, and today sustainability has become the in thing, right?
It's like the resilience, agility in business word. It's
Yeah.
usi line mein hai.
Correct.
I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I find there's a group of students who want to get into sustainability because it's the in thing, right? And they think, of course, maybe sustainability probably doesn't pay as well as IT, but they expect almost the similar, but they want to get in because it's the in thing. And I think that, I think, is a problem.
Right.
Because I think if you are not feeling it in you, it's very hard to make that change that you you in a company. That you have to feel it in you. You have to be really passionate that this can happen, and and that's when and I think companies like us. I mean, we look for that. Right? We look for that passion in the student to be able to be part of the team. Don't come into sustainability because it's the in thing.
You gave me an interesting thread to now follow, which is that, see, we are discussing responsibility of businesses, right? Corporates ki kya responsibility honi chahiye? Lekin in corporates ko bana kaun raha hai? People like us, right? So if the culture and if the culture of the company is made by its people, although culture is always about the big bosses and what they do. But if, say, the big bosses decide that, okay, we will talk about sustainability and we will have that culture seep in right to the lowest, the lowest rung of our organization, then there is a change because everybody then talks the same language and, you are aligned with those goals. Having said that, do you feel people, of course, are coming into sustainability because it's also very in, and it's also, like, for example, veganism has just become about eating vegetarian, but, you can go buy fur and you can buy lipsticks and bags and shoes and belts that are non-vegan. So, people like to do things that are particularly in and are flashy. But when we are talking about all of these people making sustainability as a way of living, we are also putting the onus on the civil society. Is our civil society, are we Indians really recognizing what's happening to us? Are we living in some Delulu land where we think, अच्छा, हम दिल्ली में हैं और ये हवा तो कोई नहीं जो 4 हफ्ते होती है and then everything is fine, because that's what people say. Everybody is all right with what is happening around them. Is that going to change?
I think it will.
Yeah, I would love to believe that.
No, I think...
How do we bring the civil society, how do we bring the citizenry to actually protest and say, we don't deserve this?
I think Gen Z is the reason, is the answer. They are much more conscious than us, and they are much more invested in it. Also reason because we have eaten up their resources. It is also because there's no option. So I feel Gen Z is very good, and then the next generation that comes will be much better, because they are understanding the issue. Like when I was growing up, I was just 7 years, and there was a 50-acre water pond, was a pond in Bangalore in front of my house. It was closed. I didn't understand anything. My parents didn't understand anything. Okay, this is for development. But today, the young children will say, why are you doing this? Right? So education plays an important role at that age. So I have a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just very optimistic also. So definitely things will change. And today we, a couple of weeks ago, we have this whole movement of pre-loved clothes. Right? In HSR layout, they did a fashion show. 95% of them were all youngsters who wore it and came for the show. So I think it is changing.
I would love to believe that, and a part of me does believe in it, but that brings me, Santosh, to the degrowth movement. Within India, there are so many Indias that it's unrelatable. The life as a privileged person, I or all of us may lead in our bigger cities, there are cities that are completely deprived of it. हमारे लिए ग्रोथ की डेफिनेशन जो है वो उनकी ग्रोथ की डेफिनेशन से बहुत दूर है. Having said that, when we are looking at the concept of degrowth, right, can companies and culture and society in India say that we are at a point where we are tripti ho gayi hai, ab humko aur nahi chahiye? वो तो नहीं लगता है. So when we are talking about this degrowth as a principle, where are we, and can India actually afford to think like that?
Yeah, I'll answer the first part first and then go to the degrowth as a title. To talk about degrowth, you need growth. Right? You cannot go and talk about fasting to a person below poverty line. Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that, right? So from that aspect, I totally agree that the whole concept of degrowth globally is flawed. Okay. Now coming to the exact word degrowth. Where did this come from? First of all, we coined something called growth as an equivalent to progress. That's where the problem started. Progress equals growth. When did it happen? It happened in the 50s. Invented by the US. After the Second World War, they needed something to keep their economy up. And then they linked patriotism with buying things. They linked patriotism with making bigger things.
This is the Bretton Woods, right?
Exactly. And what happens is that in 1950s, you change the whole design philosophy, design to last. People were taught in engineering to make things to design to last. In 1950s, the US changed that design for obsolescence. That's what is running right now. Then in the 50s, they also coined GDP. You produce more, you consume more, you waste more, your GDP will increase. Let me put it, you waste more, your GDP will increase. So it is that period, the 1950s, post-Second World War, you started equating progress. What we want is actually progress. We want progress to eliminate poverty. We want progress to get rid of pollution. We want progress to make our kids have a better life. That's what we want. The whole narration of progress was equated to growth. And that is where I say that this term degrowth is completely flawed.
The gentleman also said that degrowth is now also monetary, you know. Yeah.
I mean, we started equating everything with money. I mean, there is this famous Tamil song, I don't want to narrate it, where it says that the man learned to fly looking at the these things, and man learned to swim looking at the fishes. Where did he learn to make money?
But degrowth as a concept also speaks about perhaps companies realizing that, all right, now I'm freshly out of watching Buy More, which is a new Netflix documentary on how the entire industry is asking you to buy more. And they're producing things that will not last more. And that then there are things that are ending up in garbage dumps and landfills and other things. And amongst one of them is the Ghaziabad 100-foot mountain of now those of you who have been there. Now अब वो पहाड़ 200 feet का हो गया है. क्योंकि it was just 50-100 feet, and then they said, no, we will produce electricity with it, but nothing happened, and now it's 200 foot long. So this is we are seeing a landfill mountain in the middle of the city. So consumerism is at the heart of growth, conventionally now. Everybody is consuming. Everybody has ambitions to consume, and the products are also being made in that way. But the organizations are not actually thinking of taking a step back and being more responsible. You know, we were talking about should it be on if you're buying a product, then should that product also, instead of having this is the calorie, this is the energy, this is vegetarian, non-vegetarian, what are the ingredients in it? Should every packet or every product that you consume not have what is the carbon footprint of me? And accordingly, people start asking those questions that, you start reading that whatever I'm consuming, how much energy was consumed in making this? Those kind of disclosures perhaps can be part of degrowth, but I don't see degrowth happening. Any opinions on that?
I think I just want to give some example that have happened in Bangalore. So there was a huge movement of citizens, Odette is here, so which said we don't want straws. Bangalore was the only place where McDonald's didn't give you straw because of the demand of the people. Then there was another movement which said, bring your own cups, BYOC. So there were a lot of tea, places which said we'll give you less, we'll charge you less if you bring your own cutlery, right? So just writing in that, half the people don't even read what is there, right? So I think it is important that, and then we have a huge movement, now it has become quite national, is Green the Red campaign, which we are asking women to use alternate to single-use sanitary napkins. Sure. We have successfully done that in a village near Mysore, where even the clogging of the drains have stopped.
Wonderful.
Okay, so I think unless we demand, nothing is going to happen. So how do we create that citizen who will do it? Is a consumer has to, asking companies to stop will happen when consumer asks, I don't want this. Start saying, I don't want this, right? So I think those are the movement that has a lot of hope. And if you don't ask things as a consumer, you will never get it. So expecting a company to think like, I will grow less or I will have less profit, even their investors will not invest in them, right? And for your question, I wanted today, I don't want to talk about money, but it took us just to convince 2 brands, it has taken 4 years, but they did pay the premium that is required to make that happen. So I think there is little bit of awareness, but we have to be practical. Today, if I'm going to go to the company and say, no, you have to pay this, they'll say, it's okay, I'll go to somebody else to do it. So it's a process.
Wonderful. Saisha,
I
just wanted you chime in and then I'll ask you that next
so I think just to add to what Nalini mentioned, right? What I've been seeing, talking about my generation, my peers who, are literate, right? But when it comes to awareness, when you talked about demanding better, right? I see still rampant lack of awareness. Like, I feel there has to be a baseline level of awareness, which is still very, very poor, to be honest, where people have no idea what goes behind the scenes, in the prep. So, for example, take this pair of jeans, right? Nobody knows that behind one pair of jeans goes close to 7,000 liters of water. Right? So I, again, to make this happen, I started writing, right? Just to make sure that, at least some people around me can at least start questioning things. And questioning can only happen when you get to know a little about behind the scenes, right? And that's been the reason why, we actually partnered with Hasiru Dalla in Bangalore last month, where we took them, again, with them to help them see what a material recovery facility looks like, so that, because if you see, for the common lay person, waste management is a big, big black box. They have no idea what happens to their waste once it gets out of their bin. Aapne koode wale ko de diya, aage aapko koi idea nahi hai, you have no interest. So the idea has, what we've been trying to do is seeing is believing, right? When you see those bales of all your takeout containers, the food that you order from Zomato, Swiggy, piled up, it really feels jarring, right? And again, it may not jar all people, but I'm sure at least some people who see that visual will question their, what they're doing.
Yeah, the end-to-end of every product, how it reaches you, where it ends up after you have left it, all of those things should be part of awareness campaigns.
Yeah, and I think, so what, I mean, if you, the moment you ask somebody, they're like, मेरे पास time नहीं है सबके लिए, right? Time नहीं है is because interest नहीं है.
True.
Right? And that is where, you know, we've been trying to partner with a lot of different kinds of storytellers because we feel that climate and sustainability are places which can use a lot of good storytelling for advocacy.
Yeah.
Right? And that can be through comedy, that can be through song, music, art, right? So we've been doing a lot of those things.
Wonderful. I think, yeah, the content has to be presented in a more palatable way and in a way that, you know, it becomes part of your life.
Especially, you know, in today's time where attention deficit is the big thing, where how do you get somebody to peel their eyes off of a screen and look at, you know, people around you?
By giving them something on the screen. Maybe some apps that tell you, you know, like we have these apps that do calorie calculating of the food we eat. Similarly, we should feed in, you know, I'm using this chashma and, you know, how much that chashma cost me on my carbon footprint. I think some innovative ideas need to come on making people more carbon footprint conscious.
I think
and how...
Yeah.
Has to be like, reel mein bata do kitna hoga.
Honestly, I think even carbon footprint, I think just wanted to add there, right? So carbon footprint, so there's this concept of carbon tunnel vision, where everything we've been talking about is carbon emissions.
Correct.
Actually what you need is an ecological footprint, where you
Good idea.
understand what all resources went into what you're consuming today, because you have no idea pani, land, the kind of, you know, hazardous waste that goes out of it. Sorry, go ahead.
Just 1 minute. During the consulting days, I asked one of my team members to do a actual cost of 1 kg tomato by factoring in all the environmental costs, not even social costs and all. So the, you know, the environmental pollution which goes through the fertilizers, the emissions which happens, you put an equivalent kind of a factor. And we came out, this was in 2017 when we did this, it came out that 1 kilo of tomato will cost you 350 rupees. So every time you buy tomato at whatever, 50 rupees, 60 rupees, that 300 rupees of environmental damage you are doing.
And I think just one
That's
trivia.
a scary thought now. I take back my suggestion of having an app. All right. I also see our finalists are back, so that's also my signal to wrap up. No. All right. Okay. I wanted to, you know, towards the end, I wanted to bring up COP29. And Santosh, you've been to almost quite a few of them as a pilgrimage, annual pilgrimage of yours. So I want to know, where is the civil society at COP29? You know, the leaders talk about it. There is a lot of cynicism as well. But, you know, where is the civil society? Who are these people? Where are they? Because we do see some of them, but they are conglomerates in themselves. Where is the Aam Janta there?
Okay. So first of all, what is COP? COP is Conference of Parties, and the parties are the government delegates, right? And you wanted observers to moderate those discussions and keep them accountable, and that's where the observers come. So COP was only supposed to be between the parties and the observers. And the observers usually are people from the scientific background who study all these kind of things, and NGOs and, you know, people who work. Private sector was never there. Okay.
Now it's only about private sectors.
No. In between, what happened is that they came out with what is called as a green zone. Now they painted it green there also. Okay. So the conference where actually the negotiation happens in what is called as a blue zone, and somewhere in between we have the 30th COP next year. So somewhere around the 15th or 16th, they came out with a green zone where they said, you people assemble there. Okay, we will do the negotiations here. The private sector, whatever you want to do, you do it in the green zone. What has happened is that now, as you rightly said, if you go into the COP, into the blue zone now, you need to kind of look around to find somebody who is from the social sector. You have seen the numbers, right? I mean, Dubai, we had 2,500 only oil executive lobbyists inside the blue zone. I'm not even talking about the green zone. Huh? Now, I really don't know where they get these passes, because the passes by the UN is never issued to private companies. It's never issued. Okay. Pardon? Yeah, but in the climate COP, it was never given, but I do not know how they get the passes also. So they are there. And the influence of them has increased in the last 3 COPs. And it was post-COVID, we have seen this kind of a influx of the private sector into the COP. But having said that, people talk about the, why COP and all those things. But let me tell you that whatever has happened till now is because of the whole COP process. So we wouldn't have even this without that process. But yes, one need to kind of question the whole of the process. Yes, private sector is required. Let me also bring that point, because you cannot keep them away from the discussions. You need them into the discussions. But you need to kind of draw somewhere the line from the, especially the UN has to draw that line as to whom you want exactly there. Because the whole of this news about the lobbyists and all those things is putting a taint into the whole COP process, which till now, as a person who has been attending COPs, I say it is not tainted. Let me be very honest, the way in which the negotiation happens, although these guys move around, but nothing of that influences much. It actually happens, but the kind of news which is happening around is putting a taint into the whole process. So I think the UN need to kind of check that particular thing. But yes, it's a process which is required, and whether it is delivering the expected results, definitely no.
All right. We are totally running out of time, but okay, one question. All right.
The hypocrisy is for everybody to see, 291 private jets flowing in, 45,000 people going into these green zones, talking of environment, climate, whatever. But my question to you is, have you seen the climate agenda being hijacked by the richer countries, where our agendas are not really put on the table? It's the rich countries arm-twisting climate change agenda to a very large extent. Have you seen that?
See, these two things, what you talked about, are two distinct things. These are two distinct things. You don't expect them to fly those jets. I'm okay with they flying to World Economic Forum. That's a private sector event, so let them fly around and do that. But in the COP, they are not parties. They are not observers. So they are not required there actually. So that's where I said UN has to decide who they want inside there. So one part of that. The second part of it is it's all negotiations, right? The whole conference is about negotiation. So people who come with their agenda, every country has their agenda. Though the least developed countries, the oceanic countries, everybody has their agenda. But let me tell you, the process is so that everyone has their voice equal in the COP process. Yes, you don't come into an agreement because of the varied views and the biases people will have who are coming into the table. But from voicing out, everybody has an equal opportunity, and they are heard and they are discussed in the equal importance, even if it is, let's say, Malta or whether it is the US.
That's reassuring to hear, and that's good to hear. All right, with that we wrap. We thought we will take questions, lekin ab bilkul time nahi hai. We are waiting for the debate, which is going to be the highlight of the event. Thank you, panelists, for this wonderful, candid conversation and for all the insights. Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you.
So before you all step down, I would just request you to stay back for one group photo on the stage itself. Yeah. So, at the risk of repeating myself, I would say it was indeed a riveting discussion. We talked about carbon footprint. We talked about progress being equated to growth. We talked about attention spans and the need for effective storytelling. We talked about climate agenda being hijacked. We talked about what's happening behind the curtain in COP summits. We talked about cost of sustainability, both from an investment perspective and from an ecological footprint perspective. But the most important thing, I think, which I never thought I would hear here in this platform is the Gen Z's solulus to their delulus. So I think we did cover a lot of things in the past 1 hour. And one key takeaway for me, at least, was the regret minimization framework, which we need to adopt. We need to adopt when we are thinking about sustainability and hundreds of other places, definitely. With this, I would hand the mic back to Mr. Nair to take the debate to the next round. Okay. So I think the jury is still making their way in. And in this long list of things that we talked about, we also talked about Ghaziabad's waste dump. And I have a story to share related to it. So people from XLRI over here, the new hostel specifically, the one which is towards the Marine Drive, and a lot of people don't know about this, in fact. There was a huge municipal waste dump which was there. So practically for 15 to 20 years, all of the municipal solid waste from Jamshedpur was coming to this place, which was right across XLRI's boundaries. And if you see that today, you won't realize that is what was happening over there. What has happened now? What the Jamshedpur authorities and Tata Steel together have done, they've done a complete renovation of that area. They've completely transformed it into a viewpoint, which is in fact visited by families. We could see families, children coming there, playing there in evenings, weekends, early mornings. So these are some stories which I think we can take back in terms of what is the change that can come about. We talked about our Zomato and Swiggy orders. Some time back in Bangalore, there was a movement which the Bangalore Municipal Corporation did, where we had the Safai Walas who were eventually picking up the trash from our homes. They were coming in those 10-second, 20-second reels and showing what is the importance of washing that waste and segregating that waste well so that it is effectively recycled. So I think these were two stories I had, but we are open to have more stories here.
Innovation.
Let's have a huge round of applause for that.
So 200 waste pickers are included in collection in Jamshedpur. We were there for 1.5 years to make it happen. And the second one, Wash the Dabba, is not BBMP campaign, it's our campaign.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected over there. Do we have the jury back? Yeah. So, Mr. Nair, you can take over.
So back again for the final round between the two top teams for today. So let me just invite the jury members to be on stage. So you had a great panel discussion. Now back again to the debate, and that's the the premier program for today, and the final round between the two top teams, and that will decide who is the winner for the 5th Father McGrath Memorial Debate Competition. So let me just now call on the team 1, that is Gregorius SG for IIM Lucknow, and team 2, that is Optimus from XLRI Jamshedpur. Can somebody get a chair onto this? There's one chair less. So those who have joined late, I just want to know, just introduce our jury again. We have Anulal, founder of Yoga Smith and author. We have Vinay Nair, General Manager, Costa Emerging International. We have Dr. Akshay Sani, Managing Director, Chevron. We have Mr. Ashok Ramchandran, Director HR of Aditya Birla Group. We have Ranjit Gupta, Managing Director, Wholesale Banking Operations, Wells Fargo. And last, we have Rajesh Lakanpal, Managing Director of Courts India. So the first, we had 2 rounds of intense debate. One was from the team from IIM Lucknow versus the team from SPJ in Mumbai. And the second round, we had 2 teams contesting against each other. Both teams were from XLRI Jamshedpur. So the teams who won the first round was from IIM Lucknow, and one team from XLRI Jamshedpur has actually been here for the final round. So just a quick update for that. Yeah. So let's go to the final round. Everything ready? There I am, Lucknow. Here's XLRI team. Optimus is for the for.
For the motion.
This is for and they are against. Yeah. Can somebody keep the name board also on that so that they clearly know who is the government and who is the opposition also? Yeah. Optimus is for and IIM Lucknow is against. Right? Yeah. So everything set? Fine. So here we go for the the final round for today's 5th McGrath Memorial Debate Competition. The topic for the final debate, the government or the House believes that the global economy should degrow to reverse the impact of global warming. That's the topic for the day. And let me just now call on the Prime Minister to introduce the motion.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, I just want to give an analogy that many of us might be famous with, or a term that is close to all of us, the infamous 2-year exit. That is to say, you get into a job where you work yourself to the bone and then you leave it. That is a direct consequence of status quo. That is the production-linked model that we find ourselves in. We define our self-worth, we define a nation's self-worth by how much it produces. In this case, economic output. However, we find a stark dichotomy between this production and the well-being of people. People are working themselves to the bone, they're facing mental illness, psychological trauma, and just plain simple overwork. That is the status quo we live in. So the burden then on side opposition is to either claim that status quo is good with all its pitfalls, or provide a counter model to what I will now propose and define. So the definition, degrowth, what exactly does this mean? The etymology of the word comes from a river whose banks are swelled in a flood, returning to its normal flow. So degrowth is about taking things back to the way they should be. In this particular model, we will provide a phase of 3 in how degrowth can be implemented in the global economy, which also requires some clarification. The global economy refers to the interlinked interactions of all nations along with the local autonomy that each country requires due to their specific needs. Moving into how we mechanize this. Firstly, the buy-in of a global body, for example, WEF or the United Nations, using a degrowth model. As this has become a point of national and international interest, frameworks for degrowth have come out, such as Low Grow and Euro Green, and only need to be put into practice at present. This can happen through 3 phases. Number 1, an opt-in and guidance mechanism for countries which have reaped the benefits of the productivity-linked paradigm that we find ourselves in. for example, Scandinavian nations, the United States, so on and so forth. These should be the first countries to implement the model, so we learn, adapt, and change basis their relative buffer to instability. We look at options such as green job guarantees, working time hour reductions, removing unequal exchange between the global north and global south, and questioning the fiduciary duties of high-level executives. Then we move to phase 2, proliferation. Obviously, degrowth can't be restricted simply to one nation or one block of nations. So this is where the global south and middle power countries come in. Here we have the caveat that obviously not everybody will buy into this model. For example, it's unlikely that you can get Kim Jong-il to ever say that, yes, I'll follow a degrowth model. But that is symmetric across all paradigms. It's unlikely he'll follow any model proposed by anybody. So proliferation is for those who are a little more rational and sane-minded in the global south. There is where support comes in. And lastly, the crux of the degrowth system, the decoupling of GDP. Here, I would like to flesh this out further. Decoupling of GDP means that a country's relative standing is no longer linked to their economic output in terms of production. This does away with the evils of jobless growth, with the evils of accumulated capital in the hands of very, very few. And instead, social wellness indicators become the need of the hour, become the metric for the future, for example, Gini's index. Moving on from here, my honorable DPM will talk about how this buy-in will happen and how various stakeholders will engage with the degrowth model. And then we will try and do a clash-by-clash analysis of status quo versus what we propose. I rest my case.
Thank you. Let me now call on the Leader of the Opposition for her views.
Good evening to this august House. We are speaking against the motion and will firmly establish that the impact of global warming can be reversed without causing a slowdown in the global economy. Furthermore, we challenge the underlying premise of this argument that a trade-off needs to be done between climate action goals and the growth of the global economy. As opposition, our argument is structured around 3 core questions. First, what are the dynamics and underlying drivers of global economic growth? Second, what are the key contributors of global warming? And third, are the 2 goals, climate action and global economy, converging or competing? Let me tie in and address the first 2 questions before I get to the third. The growth of the modern global economy can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution starting in Britain in the late 18th century. This altered the largely agrarian economy to that of dominated by industry and machine manufacturing. However, it was the industrial and technological spurt and the rapid spread of trade and commerce post-World War II that had an exponential impact on global economy. Just some numbers here. The Madison Project database of the World Bank, which lists the growth of global GDP, has adjusted for inflation, grew 14x from $10 trillion in 1950 to $140 trillion by 2022. The primary drivers of this exponential growth have been rapid industrialization, infrastructure creation, expansion of global trade, and in more recent decades, internet and digital technologies. This growth has been largely dependent on burning of fossil fuels, which drastically reduce the planet's green cover and deplete scarce environmental resources. The biggest contributor, accounting for nearly 2/3 of global heating influence of all human-produced greenhouse gases, has been carbon dioxide. Fossil fuels like coal and oil, we all know, contain carbon that plants pulled out of the atmosphere over millions of years. We are returning this in just a few hundred. The moot question here, therefore, is to ask, can the goal of reversing the impact of global warming be achieved without causing a slowdown in the global economy? We respond with an emphatic yes because of 3 reasons. The first, unlike in the decades after World War II, growth now is led by technology-led productivity and innovation. Second, with the emergence and rapid adoption of renewable energy sources, the use of fossil fuels is drastically reducing. And 3, the adoption of sustainability and climate action agenda by the global north and south
presents an opportunity for everyone to work together towards shared environmental goals. Let me conclude with a metaphor. Discarding the pursuit of global economic growth to reverse the impact of global warming and climate change would be akin to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Here, the baby being the global GDP, when all that needs to be done is to replace the bathwater. Thank you.
Thank you, the Deputy Prime Minister, for your views.
So the leader of the opposition has been defending the status quo that the current model of consumerist-based, consumerist-driven growth economy is the best, and it works in tandem to meet out the climate action goals as well. But I disagree with that. Current growth-centric models are very unsustainable in nature, as the Honorable Prime Minister laid out that this model has given rise to so many crises that has engulfed the world today, in terms of the mental health crisis that, or even the climate crisis that has been a direct impact of the current growth-centric model. The constant cry for overproduction that leads to many industries producing to maintain profit margins, which in turn leads to waste. And this degrowth basically, so this model basically promotes, that has everything that is wrong with the world today. I believe the degrowth model that we propose instead, it promotes local production, it promotes repair economies that works to control waste, that mitigates waste. And the degrowth models also will analyze and suggest a shifting away from fossil fuels, because we will no longer be focusing on the growth-based industries. Now, I want to give out a few examples of such alternative mechanisms that are in there. So let's take up the example of Bhutan, which has a concept called Gross National Happiness Index. They have basically moved away from ranking themselves and ranking themselves in comparison to the world in terms of the GDP or the output, but on the GNH index. This index is based on 33 indicators across 9 domains, such as living standards and psychological well-being. Now, this is rooted in very indigenous Buddhist principles, and the 4 pillars of this are sustainable and equitable socio-economic development, environmental conservation, preservation and promotion of local indigenous culture, and good governance. And guess what? Bhutan is actually the first country to meet its carbon neutrality goals, and in words of their Prime Minister, it's actually the country to be a carbon negative country for the first time being, because it doesn't emit as much as they preserve. Now, let's talk about some demerits of the current status quo. We have an inequitable distribution of resources, as we have seen. Oxfam has reported that the top 1% of earners in G20 countries have seen their income grow by 45% over the last 4 decades. And this richest 1% also emit as much planet heating as much as the 2/3 of humanity. So what we see here is an extreme inequitable distribution of resources, wealth, and in turn, these top 1% of the people who also consume a lot more and emit a lot more, and thereby contributing to the climate injustice. So the model that has been proposed, and I'll just lay out that it will be a 3-phase model. We first identify what the world needs, and we don't make a binary between the global north and the global south. Even between the countries, developed countries, for instance, Spain, there is the Catalonia region. In USA, there are the southern states which need more attention. So this model will basically first figure out what are the needs of these countries. Then we make equitable distribution happen between the regions that are more impacted. And we would also propose a world body, something on the lines of World Economic Forum, that makes sure that all sovereign states adhere to it. Now, who will buy in with this model? We have 3 stakeholders. First is the public which needs better quality of life. They will first buy in with the model. The government or the establishment who want to, of course, appeal the public will also, in reaction to this, agree to this degrowth-based model. And lastly, the corporates who, in reaction to the government's guidelines and regulations, will adhere to this model, and we will swiftly move away from the growth-based agenda. Lastly, what we suggest will not happen in a moment. Of course, that's why we are laying out a complete plan of action, because degrowth doesn't necessarily mean that we completely put an end to industrial output. Yeah.
Is it audible? Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, to bring such points about why we should degrow while wearing the nicest suits, having the latest iPhone, rolling down in this event in a nice Toyota Camry, sitting in an air-conditioned room, talking out of your chairs of privilege as to why we should drop everything, stop growing, and let the people who do not have access to resources, let them live with whatever they have, because hey, happiness index is great for us. I would just want to say one thing. The reason they brought out that argument is that they come from a position of privilege, right? They come from the privilege where they already have access to resources. Today, if all of us do not get further access to technology, our lives will just be fine. But what about the rest of the world? And they themselves mentioned 2/3 of the world. We were discussing about the country which is flooded with cycles, and the city which is flooded with cycles, that's Amsterdam, right? Whenever we think about Amsterdam, we think about beautiful scenic roads, we think about people cycling to work, cycling to office. It's because they are a developed country. They have access to resources, they have good roads and infrastructure, and they have the luxury to cycle. Let's contrast that and take the example of India. In India, 50% of all of India's population does not have any access to motorized mobility. They either walk or they cycle to work. Let's take the most prevalent example that we have, which is quick commerce today. I had the privilege to engage with a Swiggy delivery agent in Mumbai who did not have any motorized mobility and walks and cycles and delivers products. In the scorching heat of Mumbai, he travels almost 45 to 50 kilometers per day and earns a mere income of 300 to 350 rupees. If he stopped growing, this is what his life is going to be looking like. Gladly, the government did not think the same that they do, and we had the advent of electrification and electric vehicles coming into our country, and now he has access to an electric cycle, due to which there has been an increase in his income, there has been reduction in drudgery, and that has impacted his life immensely. My second point is that there is actually no connection with growth and reduction of global warming. Let's take the most recent example of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw slowdown of economy, we saw that businesses were shut, but yet 2019 to 2023 were one of the hottest summers that we have seen. We have seen rise in global temperatures like no other year in this decade, pointing towards the fact that even if you stop growing, there is not going to be a significant change in global emission levels. And my last point is that as per a report by the World Economic Forum, there is actually no trade-off between sustainable practices and development of businesses. In fact, 50% of all business practices can continue to be as they are, even though they move towards economic development by being sustainable. That goes to say that growth is not the enemy here. It's unsustainable practices that are the enemy. These are practices which needs to be more conscious. We have to be more wary of how we are growing, rather than just dropping the ball and saying, hey, you know what, let's go back to ancient times. Today, if Bhutan has an earthquake, people cry, millions suffer. But when Japan has an earthquake, they're absolutely unaffected because they've spent so much on development of their technology. If we stop development, if we stop growth, the global south will suffer. And privileged people like all of us can happily debate, hey, should we grow or not grow? But the people who are actually going to suffer are not here. Therefore, keeping them in mind, let's ensure that we keep growth sustainable. Let's ensure we have a conscious mind. And let's ensure that whatever steps we are taking and keeps everyone in a better place than they were before they were starting. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just call on the Prime Minister for the final comments.
Yes, wonderful. So, panel as well as audience, I'm going to go a little off script. I'm not going to do clash by clash anymore. I'm going to do a speech by speech analysis, because I found some very interesting points in DLO's case right here. Firstly, the idea of the so-called chairs of privilege that we're sitting in. So there's no counter proposal there. Is he saying that we simply stop caring because we have resources? There's no idea of what it means to move forwards. Then the heart-wrenching example of the Swiggy delivery driver. Why is he outside working himself to the bone? It is because of the production-linked model that he has, because he has to work for a living, because there's no social infrastructure for him to rely on. Yeah, he doesn't have a cycle to use. That is because it has not been provided to him by this GDP-linked model that exists, right? And then they talk about how privileged actors should not be moving forwards with any kind of change. That's a very fair assumption to make, but we are not simply talking through thin air right here. We are giving you a model about why this should happen and how it can happen. We stand with opposition when they say that, yes, the global south can be affected. That's why there's a three-phase introduction to degrowth, so that it doesn't affect people who are looking towards production to help themselves grow. That is the fundamental coda we are looking to get to. And why are we looking to get to this? Because we believe in long-term growth. So long-term growth for us, panel, happens when there is change, not just in decades, but in centuries, which can only happen through degrowth. If we continue with this so-called linkage between sustainability and growth, which has only been asserted by DLO with no real mechanization of the same, then we will not have change. We see that nobody is meeting climate change goals. We see nobody is sticking to what is necessary to stop essentially the planet from burning itself to death. So when we go back to ancient times, as DLO states, that is not something the degrowth model is proposing. What we are doing is we are creating infrastructure, creating jobs that will be working for us. And that does mean some reduction in, let's say, frivolous production. Do we need so many Rolex watches for so many billionaires? Do we need an artisan to spend 600 hours pinstriping a Rolls Royce so somebody can have a nice fancy car? Probably not. That time, that money, those resources can be used in a degrowth model in a much, much better way. Now, going on to the speech of LO. So they state that we are bringing about a slowdown in global economy. This is not something that we said, so we want to kind of clarify what is meant by degrowth. Degrowth is, again, about reprioritizing our focus. Yes, we bite the bullet and say, sure, your GDP might come down a little, but that's why that third stage happens. That is to say, decoupling between GDP and the relative standing of a country. Right now, when we look at the US, people are still impressed. Why are they impressed? Because their GDP is high. But when you go there, what do you see? You see gun violence, you see, as DPM brought up, mental health issues. You see people working without really knowing what they're doing for the planet, for the people, for themselves even. And therefore, the idea of the global GDP growing, of which a good historical exegesis is given by LO, does not really bring any water to this current debate. Moving to water, the analogy of throwing the baby out with bath water, right? So the baby in this case being the GDP is somewhat a strange analogy to make, because we are constantly talking about the fact that the GDP is not an object of importance. So implicitly, LO is still stating that yes, GDP is as important as a child. We are saying that this is not the case, and I think we've provided enough reasonable mechanization for why that happens, and there is not really much need of a rebuttal for the same, because I think it has come through in our speeches, and that is why I believe proposition takes the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. For the final comments, the Leader of Opposition.
Bhutan is a beautiful country, brings back fond memories, but let me not digress. How much has Bhutan actually grown? And India is the one who provides everything to Bhutan, but let's stay on script. So let me remind you of what the UN's Brundtland Commission, which is the gold standard in sustainability, said in 1987. Sustainable growth is defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising on the ability of future generations to meet their needs. The Honorable Prime Minister and his deputy spoke about unsustainable growth models. I would just like to say that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has clearly shown models with growth pathways that show that even with economic growth, we can stay within pre-industrial levels of greenhouse gas emissions. They spoke about local production and economy, about equitable growth. I would like to bring some facts here. During the COVID-19 pandemic, between 2019 and 21, while the average income of the bottom 40% fell by 2.2%, the average income of the top 40% fell only by 0.5%. The global poverty rate has gone up from 7.8% to 9.1%. What this all means is that when the economy degrows, it is the poor who suffer the most. The idea of the economy's growth is to make the poor richer. The global south will suffer from a variety of issues if the economy degrows. Just two issues here are communal violence, because they're fighting over scarce resources, and health hazards. We know of various instances where people are using coal and wood to keep themselves warm, to cook, which causes health hazards by inhaling noxious fumes. Thirdly, the point of degrowth. If countries like the US and Scandinavia, as quoted by Honorable Prime Minister, do not grow, who is going to bring the innovation to us? And finally, I would just like to end by saying, why must we compromise on the growth of the global economy, thereby pushing millions of the poorest of poor wallow in poverty and misery, when the global warming reversal goals can be achieved through sustainable economic growth, enabled by technological innovation, renewable energy adoption, and climate change. Finally, as Charles Darwin said, the one who survives is not the strongest, the one who survives is who has the ability to adapt. As we talk about climate change goals, greenhouse gas emissions, we all need to adapt. The trend is moving towards adoption of clean energy. Let us not go against the wind. And finally, India is a prime example of all this. Our economy has been steadily growing at the rate of 5 to 7%. Yet, we are one of the developing economies, a handful, who is on track to achieve their COP25 goals. I rest my case.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this debate competition. It's a fierce debate, the final round. And when the jury actually decides who is the final winner, by then you can just be down the stairs and take some chill. Thank you. Over to you.
So I'm sure at this point our jury has a difficult job to do. And while our jury engages in some intense decision making, let's not let the energy dip in the room. I'm sure by this time all of you have already picked your favorites. So keep those predictions handy. We'll do a quick round of hands around the hall. If you're right, you might end up with the bragging rights as the unofficial debate pundit of the 5th edition of the McGrath debate. So let's start. Who do you think was the best speaker amongst the 8 enthusiastic students who were here? Okay, let's have that in mind. And who do you feel was able to give the best rebuttals of them all? The final Prime Minister. Okay. And which team do you think is going to lift the winning title? The final winning title of this edition? See, I have a selective hearing for XLRI right now. But yes, giving both the teams due credit, both of them, I think, did fairly well. They did way beyond fairly well, I would say. And while we wait for the results, let's go back to the panel discussion we had, which had a lot of discussion around reporting, ways of reporting, multiple times that organizations have to report. So a question around the same thing. So this is again a quizzing question. Again, I have a hint. Again, the first one to raise the hand gets to answer and gets to ask for the hint, but not again after that. So it's an international movement or a project which was introduced, encouraging companies to disclose their environmental impact transparently. Do we have any guesses right now? We have the mic coming in. Okay. No. So it's an international movement or project which has been encouraging companies to disclose their environmental impact transparently, and it has seen a great adoption in the recent years.
So GRI.
That's partially correct. Any other attempts? Yeah, that was what I was going for. The Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP. Now, if you've ever gotten a chance, I would, or if you've not, I would highly encourage everyone here to browse through these reports. These reports actually provide data-driven insights on how organizations are managing risks and opportunities related to climate change, water security, deforestation, etc. At the same time, keeping in mind what our panel members shared, there is a fair deal of star marking which happens and which is not happening now. So you are able to read between the lines as well. College students who are with us here can use these reports to understand industry trends and innovative sustainability practices which they can carry forward. And industry veterans can analyze the performance and strategies of leading market players of their own organizations and drive informed decision-making and environmental stewardship decisions. On the same front in India, we have the BRSR which has been introduced, which was also discussed in detail. It's the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, which the, I think, BSc 100,000 top companies have to start reporting in India. So, do we have the jury back? Since we don't have the jury back, we'll do a quick round of bingo, but without pens and papers. And it's an bingo of environmental friendly initiatives that you're doing on a personal basis, okay? So the idea is with the first cue that I let out soon, if you've done it, you stand up. And with each cue that I'm adding after that, if you've done it personally, if you've adopted that practice personally, you keep standing. If you've not, you sit down. And we will have the winners at the end of the 6-7 cues that I have who've adopted all of those practices. Okay? So the first one is fairly easy. Use the reusable shopping bag. Okay. So this was quite intentional so that everybody feels involved. Coming to the second one, use the metro or public transport for commute in the last 10 days. We'll make it 2 weeks. Used metro or any form of public transport for commute in the last 10 to 14 days. Or bicycle. Or walking. Okay. Any form of eco-friendly commute. Okay. Now coming to the next one. Recycled paper, plastic or glass at home. Not in office spaces, at home. Okay. In the past 1 year, personally tried to calculate their own carbon footprint. No, so we have one person, we have 2 people still standing at the back. Are both of you students? Was this for a college project? I hope not. Okay, so I think we might not have the winner with the next cue, but let's see in case you have. Opted for a water-saving showerhead or followed what Odette was telling earlier, the 3-mug shower earlier. Okay, so we have... No, once you're down, you're out. So we have our winner over there. Yeah, would you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
All right, audio check. Hi, I'm Sai. I'm with Charge B. I'm with the 2022-24 PGD HRM batch. We are the first batch. Batch 4 is going on now, also called the CHRO batch colloquially. So, so I did all that calculation at Excel early this year when we were doing an ESG course as a part of our entire course. So, nice meeting you all here. Yeah, cheers.
So, as we are coming to the last bit of the night, I would again open the mic to the audience. If anyone here would want to share their 2 bits after hearing a lot that we've been hearing throughout the day, Yeah, we have a volunteer here.
First of all, I mean, a wonderfully curated evening. Absolutely loved hearing from, not just the debaters, but the panelists. Santosh made a comment about, how BSR, SR is going to help us to sort of minimize greenwashing. There's quite a large assumption underlying that, right? Which is that we're measuring the right things in terms of environmental impact. Many of you of my generation will have heard this famous story of Naseeruddin Hoja and the ring that he lost. I'll summarize it. Naseeruddin Hoja was looking for a ring in his garden in the evening, and his friend comes by and says, "What are you doing, Nasir?" And he says, "I lost a ring and I'm looking for it." And the friend joins in and helps him to look for it, and they haven't found it. They've been searching for a long time. And he said, "Are you sure you lost it here?" He said, "No, I lost it across the road in the dark place, but there's no light over there, so I'm looking here." So, about everything that we're doing in terms of measuring impact on the environment, especially from a corporate perspective, call me a bit cynical, but if we're not measuring the right things, I question how effective some of our initiatives are going to be. So I don't want to go on at length. And I do want to add one thing. I'm also hopeful that, the next generation is the answer. Last month, I was over in Chennai watching my nephew and my maid's son. So my nephew obviously goes to a very good school, and my maid's son goes to the local municipal school. And both of them were joining together and explaining to the maid why single-use plastic bags are bad. So they gave two examples. Both kids, one is 7 years old, one is 8 years old. My nephew is 7. Maid's son Kadir is 8 years old. And Kadir gave the example of when we put plastic bags out in the ocean, it strangles turtles and ocean life. And my nephew said, and if not, it'll go and end up in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. He kind of showed her on YouTube what the Great Pacific Garbage Patch looks like. So I think, that is the hope of that. That's the reason I'm optimistic, that this generation actually understands the impact of what it is to, practice clean living and sustainable living. So those are the two things I wanted to say. Thanks.
Anyone here? Anyone else who would like to share? Yeah. Okay, so, after her, get the mic here. We'll start with her, and then we'll come to you. Yeah.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. What I would like to say is that I feel like when we talk about sustainability and moving towards a more eco-friendly future, we talk from a privileged point of view. Even with what I've been studying, we as a privileged class have the comfort and we have that space to explore with new products coming in the market. Now, if you go talk to a shopkeeper and tell him, okay, use this paper bag, it's 2 rupees costlier, he's not going to use it because although it might be sustainable or it might be eco-friendly, they are thinking from an economical point of view. So I feel like to be more sustainable, and what I've seen with sustainable products in the market as well, they might be sustainable, but they're not catering to a lot of the class. They're usually more expensive from your daily wear products that you get. And with India as a country, there are not a lot of people who I feel will be able to afford these. So I think firstly, we have to make sustainability also cost efficient and cater to everyone. And secondly, like just daily examples, I feel like we need to look at it at a deeper level because you're saying you're using that cloth bag to buy your groceries, but all the groceries in it come in plastic packets. So it's kind of neutralizing the effect of the cloth bag. So when we talk about sustainability and moving towards a greener future, I think we need to start looking at it at a more deeper level and being more economically inclusive, I would say. That's it. Thank you.
Mic is all yours. Yeah.
So 2 things, absolutely bang on target. But if you're carrying a cloth bag, why go and choose fruit or vegetables which is packed in plastic? Go for carts and the open thing. That's one. 2 is when you're talking about sustainability being more expensive and that paper bag is more expensive. So since she brought out the cart vendor, I'll tell you an experiment that's been happening in many areas of Bangalore in the last 4 months.
why does that vendor give a plastic bag? Because at the end of the day, he doesn't want the customer to go to the next person, because he lose a customer, he will not have enough money to go back and feed his family. It's as basic as that. In a month, they spend between 1,500 to 3,000 rupees on plastic bags, which they give free. So the model is, it should be own bag or play for a bag, because immediately that plastic bag money which they give out free is a saving. So we have these kind of cloth bags which cost from a wholesale 4 and 7 rupees, which we want vendors to sell at 5 and 10. So they make a profit both ways. They save that plastic money and they make a profit on this. But that can only happen if it happens at a layout level where every vendor gets a sign saying own bag or pay for a bag, with the municipality involved. We have a model, we have a toolkit. It can be replicated anywhere across the country. Anyone interested, I'll be very happy. Do connect with me. And it is working where we have implemented it. So we are converting it from an issue of, convenience to the customer, where the customer, we are forcing the customer. It's a pull-push factor, where you're pushing the customer to start carrying a bag, because to twice he paid 10 rupees. Third time his memory will improve. The push factor for the vendor, the pull factor for the vendor is that they are now going from loss into actually making profit. So they actually have dignity in following the law. They no longer have the municipality guy coming every few days. They take 50 to 100 rupees every few days. So all of these problems solved. So please connect with me. We have about 150 people in the room. We can transform 150 neighborhoods straight away.
Oh, you already have the mic? Yeah.
Just a short one. I've been to the last event last year, and one of the things that strikes me that 40 years after I passed out from XLRI campus, the one name that swims in front of many of us, and there are many of us sitting over here who will recognize that, we remember Maggie. Yeah, there's something special about that man. We were taught by 40 different faculty members whose names don't come prominently. And I'll tell you why I remember Maggie, and I think it's important to this debate. He never put down a person, even they were doing opposite of what he believed in. He never, I have never experienced that, right? But he always stood up for what he believed was right. I remember there was a strike in our mess, and it was a student body, and we suspended, Raj Narayan is here. We called a strike and we dismissed them. The only person who was speaking to all these dismissed workers was Maggie, because he believed these are human beings, right? Many other people were not. This entire principle of standing up for what you believe rather than putting down people for what you don't believe, I think was so strongly embodied. And I think in all the debates that I heard last year and this year, maybe there's a hint of that. And I would really encourage us, when we get into these debates, to understand that. It's why we are having these debates. It's such a beautiful thing, and 40 years after we experienced him, it's good to say this.
I just wanted to, two perspectives here. Again, I'll link it to Maggie. We've been discussing sustainability, but my own sensing in the last 3 years, there's been a lot of focus on sustain, very little focus on ability. And I think that's the food for thought. And like what Muchi said just now, Maggie actually focused on just creating that inspiration in you to sort of look at ability. Not really linked to sustainability, but when I think of sustainability, for me, inclusivity is as important. I'll just narrate a simple example. Some of us know the Enright Hall, and the children outside the campus generally were not allowed into the campus and into the mess. And some of us in our batch actually, we said, no, unless we include them, unless we educate them, how will they actually move up? He actually sort of stood for us and said, no, they can be allowed in a particular allotted time. And we started what we call as NTPC, which was Neighborhood Training Program for Children. These were children of Dadu's family. And the intent was to teach them basic value of money at that age. And what we did was, with the carom board that used to be in the Enright Hall mess, these kids would come and play carom with us. And as they were playing carom, they started understanding 1, 2, 3, 4. That's Maggie's vision.
I think whoever has met him has really fond memories with him. And all of us here who've not met him, unfortunately, can only imagine the dynamic personality he was and the kind of change he would have brought about at that time, the kind of change which makes us talk about him 40 years later, like Sir mentioned. So we have one more volunteer here.
Yeah. You just mentioned that we only heard about Father McGrath or Maggie. I always say this to every youngster: please get a book of basic managerial skills by Father McGrath. It is an ocean of knowledge, experiential knowledge, and that was what made me as who I am today. Number one. Number two, if you want to know about Father McGrath, Maggie, and how he grew to what he was and how his students felt about him, please buy the coffee table book of Father McGrath. That is going to be available. I will pass it on in the network. It's available at visualquest.in. If you buy it, the proceeds of that goes to Father McGrath's pet projects in Bhubaneswar. So please, these two basic managerial skills for your knowledge and for your wanting to do something back to what Maggie believed in, the coffee table book.
I think all of us from the college who are still in the college days are making notes. I hope you are making notes. I've definitely registered it in my mind. And I think we have one more person who wants to give their 2 cents.
Hello, good evening. My name is Shubh Lakshmi. And although I have never been to the XLRI campus, my mother studied at XLRI. She's from the batch of 2008. I never had the privilege of getting to meet Father McGrath, but she had suggested basic managerial skills to me. And I still carry that book with me. I got it, I'm actually from Hyderabad, but I got the book with me from Hyderabad to Bangalore, and I shared it with a few of my friends. And it's like, we treat the book like the Bible in our room. It's kept like, yes, there's the book, yes. It's kept in my room, and a lot of my friends have read it. So many life lessons, starting from how to read a newspaper. The first lesson I think that's taught in the book is how to read a newspaper. I used to read a newspaper, and I never thought I could do something to make that experience even better. But Father McGrath, in one page, changed my life by telling me, there's a systematic method of reading a newspaper. And so many lessons, all in just one page. He gives each lesson in just one page, and it's a comprehensive MBA in a book is what I feel. I never had to go to XLRI, but I feel like I got an equivalent knowledge of an MBA. Yes, experiential learning was what he spoke about. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm just mentioning this, that since you mentioned BMS, this year we've started, we are giving the book to each of the top 16 teams. So the 32 finalists are getting a copy of the book. So we've made a start. And I think the 29 X-Link members requested. So they are also getting a copy. So we've started spreading the message.
And the great thing is that there is a digital version available, which people can use. And I think the campus, they've got a course where they use the digital version as well of it now. Yeah.
Okay, so is the jury ready? Or I'm pretty sure there are a lot of fond memories which people are still eager to share. But I do hear some chatter. So, keeping Father McGrath in our memories, and definitely for the people who've not read this book, making it a point to read it in the next 1 year whenever possible, we move on for the moment of truth, that who will claim the winning title. So let's find it out from Ms. Anaya.
The debate is still on, right? So we were having a wonderful debate inside. Who wins, right? And there were points and counterpoints, rebuttals and arguments. So that we will have it in the dinner time, right? So, with the drink, right? So then we will actually see who has the sense also after the drink to be a better debater, by the way. Anyway, so it was a wonderful debate competition, especially the final round. Thanks to both the teams, right? Because if you have made us stay there for quite so much time, that means the intensity of the debate was very, very high, right? So we had panelists, having one view, and then there's a counter view, and again they changed the opinion, and all this went on. So therefore, I'm not getting into what all went on there, but yeah. So only one winner for the final, though the competition was very tough. So the final winner today for the 5th Father McGrath Memorial Competition is the opposition team, Gregorius SG from IIM Lucknow. Should I call them on the stage? Yeah. Now let me call upon the runners-up, the team Optimus from XLRI.
Okay, so now... So it's definitely a time to celebrate. And this is not just a win for the finalists here, but a testament to the power of ideas. Our winners and participants today reminded us why debates are so important. They make us question, they make us learn, and they make us grow. Now, I now invite our chief guests to come forward and present the prizes. But before that, let's again once more have a huge round of applause for the winners and the runners-up team. Let's hear it loud and clear. I now humbly invite on stage Mr. Adrian Andrade, who is the CHRO of IDFC First Bank, and he also leads the CSR initiatives at this organization. He'll be giving away the prize for the winners. Okay, so our prizes are ready. Those looked like pretty heavy bags which are coming in. Yeah. So, so while our winners get these hampers from ITC, there are also rupees 10,000 gift vouchers which have been given by Van Heusen and United Colors of Benetton. So our winners are going back home with a lot of fond memories and a lot of hampers. I'm clearly able to see that. So, one of the winners from last year told me that they got the prizes, but then they struggled with the luggage allowance at the airport. And I think that's going to be a repeat story this year. I also invite on stage our director, Father Kashmir, to carry forward the proceedings. Please, sir, please, come along. Yeah, we have to give vouchers. Father, you can do the honors. I now call upon stage the teams who did not make it to the grand finale, but did give these teams a tough competition. So I would call upon stage the remaining two teams. So we have some sponsors for you all also.
They need to increase the luggage now. When it is so they distribute it on each.
I think let's have a huge round of applause for these 8 bright students here. And let's have a group photo. Yeah. Father, sir, Mr. Nair, and all the jury, let's have a group photo.
Let's have a huge round of applause for this wonderful jury we had.
I must add on here to say it was quite a debate behind scene. And the jury kind of slugged it out. Finally, we had to say, okay, which way to go? Unis bees, something has to give way. So credit to both the teams. And I think the jury was truly split. And we kept shifting the split as well. So we weren't sure finally where we landed till we came to. So well done to both the teams, really.
But I'm not done speaking yet. So with all your goodies, I would request the participants to take their seats. And if, sir, you also could take your seat and right now. But I want the jury to stay back. That's a special request which has come in. And I did hear somebody asking about the best speaker from the jury. Unfortunately, we don't have a prize for them, but we do have a Best Speaker prize for the participants who were here. And it is going to be an audience vote as it was declared earlier. So the screen is going to come down again. There's going to be a QR code on it. Please scan the QR code and give your vote. For the jury, I have some printouts over here, so you can do the same. If anybody is struggling, we have a lot of volunteers with these round badges who would help you with the QR code. So this was definitely a case of technology being funny at the most awkward moments. But yes, let's do it the conventional way. I would...
Not fair. Especially for the jury, not fair.
It's available? Okay, so it's working. It's working now. The tech team, can you put the code again and lower the lights? It's the same QR, right? Because we have the printouts here. Or if you want to see their faces, we can have a quick round. Okay, we'll take jury's votes then. Jury, and if anybody remembers their faces and names, you carry on with your vote. And we are taking in jury's vote in parallel.
So if you want, I can call them on the stage with the names so that you understand who they are. Yes. Should I call them on the stage? Ganapavya from Vigori's SD. Please come out. And Sonali Bora. If you can just spell the name and the institute and please. This is Ryan Lucknow, Vigori's SD. Ganapavya and Sonali. Ganapavya and Sonali. Okay. We have Saurav. Saurav and Mihir from SPJ.
Who, Saurav, if you can raise your hand while you are coming up. Yeah.
From SPJ.
Mihir Joshi is coming up next.
Then we have Gavin Shichella from XLRI. And Anshi Pandey. Then Bhavesh Chaturvedi and Pramit Kumar Das.
So once more, we'll start from there. Gyanata, you can start with your name. Louder, guys. So we'll give 10 more seconds for everyone to vote. Yeah. Done? Anybody still left? Okay, I guess you guys can take your seats. Yeah.
No tampering.
Results are ready? Okay. So, while the results are loading, we'll do, now that you can match the faces to the names, who do you think is the best speaker? For? No, so your results are logged in. Nobody can vote now. Okay, so I take back my exit polls because the results are here.
Okay, so the results, the audience results are here. The best speaker is Gantavya. And the best rebuttal is Pramit.
With this, last 1 minute. With this, I'm glad to announce that we'll see you again next year on November 22nd for the 6th edition of Father McGrath Memorial Debate. So mark your calendars right away. And with that, we come to the end of this incredible evening. Let's take a moment to acknowledge the people and organizations who made this possible. And for the same, I humbly invite Ms. Kavita from XLRI's illustrious batch of 87 to deliver a vote of thanks to the teams who made this possible.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you had an enjoyable and enlightening evening. It's been a long one, and our grateful thanks to all who are here in support of MaggieSpeak, the 1,024 teams that participated, the panel members, and of course, the XL alum. Thanks as always to our alma mater, XLRI, which gave us a teacher and guide like Maggie to celebrate. Father George and Father Kashmir, directors of the Jamshedpur and NCR campus, have been most supportive from day one on strengthening MaggieSpeak, a forum for inculcating responsible leadership. Thank you. Many thanks to Professor Param, Associate Dean, Student Affairs. His office has been extremely prompt in answering all our queries. Kamlesh and Sandhya from the Accounts Department and the Travel Desk team, your support is invaluable. Thank you. MaggieSpeak is an event for the students, by the students. The excellent student team of XLRI has been the backbone of this event. They have invested much in MaggieSpeak's success, from spreading the word, actively anchoring each round, including the online semi-final, and taking care of the back end. The excellent team members, come on stage, please, and take a bow. This could not have been possible without you. A big round of applause to them, please. Thank you for supporting our cause so sincerely and so actively. Every year, corporates come forward to support us in this mission of spreading Father McGrath's message at large. This year, we have IDFC First Bank as our gold sponsors. Thank you. Bharat Petroleum, JK Tech, and Hindustan Petroleum are our regular backers, sponsoring every edition so far. ONGC, JK Enterprises, and Lupin Laboratories have joined the gang this year. Thank you. We've also had gift hampers from an illustrious group of companies, Nestle, ITC, Unibic, and Britannia. You saw what everybody was carrying back. Van Heusen and United Colors of Benetton have given vouchers to the winners. A very, very illustrious jury, which has had to work really hard today. Anu Lal, founder, Yoga Smith and author. Rajesh Lakhanpal, Managing Director, Coats India. Ranjit Gupta, Managing Director, Wholesale Banking Operations, Wells Fargo. Vinay Nair, General Manager, Costa Emerging International. Akshay Sahani, Managing Director, Chevron. Ashok Ramchandran, Director, HR, Aditya Birla Group. Please accept a small token of appreciation for taking time out from your busy schedule. They made you work hard, the finalists. The panel discussion gives the audience a deeper insight into the theme of the event. Thank you to all the panelists and Mugdha for conducting such an interesting exchange of views. MaggieSpeak is an initiative of the XLRI alumni across batches. They form the core committee and the jury for all rounds of video submissions, including the online semi-final. Many thanks to all of you. Without this, you are part of the audience too. Thank you for being here in support. A special shout out to Nandana, batch of 22, for being our MC, and Sarit, batch of 2009, for being our chairperson. Finally, our thanks to the 1,000+ teams for their participation. We are growing from strength to strength each year due to the interest across all campuses. We need your support. Thank you so much. And we will move to dinner on the terrace from here. It's dinner and cocktails. Please do join us. Thank you.